healing things, loving things, happy things, for the rebuilding of the new world, the blessing of the world, to build the kingdom here of the Most High God here on earth. Blessings to you, sending you love and positive vibrations around the world. Blessings to you, and welcome.
Most motivation, start with devastation. You must fall before you rise, they want a demonstration. I'm here to get it all, right before I spend it all. The elder need to come and see the youth, they need to get involved. I want the finer things, in love with shiny things, descended from black royalty, so you can blame my veins. I just call it blessings, I got the right perspective. If I see myself going off, I'm just gonna change direction. I love the brotherhood, with all the flaws of brotherhood. I ain't gotta say a damn word and know it's understood. Yeah, we make mistakes, but that's what make us great. Learn how to accept apology without acting fake. I know the pot is hot, because you're grudge bearing. A lot of niggas going blind because they sun is staring. They on the mission to dim the light, we call it tail bearing. The law said thou should not covet, but he's still staring. And now I'm mortified with all the sins that multiplied. Got your brother crying at the wall like a Mordecai. I'm really horrified, a lot of brothers effeminized. They really start to bug my damn nerves, I use pesticide.
Unlearn, relearn, and apply. Get your blessings from the Most High. Matthew 7:7, seek and you shall find. If you knock, it shall be open wide. Blessings, ayy, get your blessings, ayy. Deuteronomy 28:2-3. All these blessings shall come upon thee. All these blessings shall overtake thee. Get your blessings, hearken unto thee. Blessed shall thou be in the field, blessed shall thou be in the city.
I push a Range Rover until the rain's over. Dying from an overdose of hate, man, he can't stay sober. But it's not the car, it's my spirit, man. Claiming that he show brotherly love, but he never does. There's no greater wealth than your family's health. Gather all the negativity and put it on the shelf. And it's nothing wrong when you have success. A father leave inheritance to his children, that man is blessed.
Unlearn, relearn, and apply. Get your blessings from the Most High. Matthew 7:7, seek and you shall find. If you knock, it shall be open wide. Blessings, ayy, get your blessings, ayy. Deuteronomy 28:2-3. All these blessings shall come upon thee. All these blessings shall overtake thee. Get your blessings, hearken unto thee. Blessed shall thou be in the field. Blessed shall thou be in the city.
All right. We back at it. Back again as promised. Bonus content from the brother Ivory, the savant, all the way from the Levant. Man, I told you, man, this brother right here is the young phenom, the young prodigy. Look, man, this brother has done nothing but give you guys that straight fire and that heat rock back-to-back presentations today. You guys seen what he did earlier with Haplogroup J, part 3, which was amazing. He brought forth plenty of resources, citations, and points showing you who the Haplogroup J belongs to and what people groups that the Haplogroup J would be associated with. So tonight, with no further ado, I hand it over to my brother, the Ivory of Israel, the Hebrew of Israel. Talk to him.
Shalom, everyone. Shalom. I do advise you to check out that video that I did literally like 3 to 4 hours ago. It deals with haplogroup J, haplogroup I, the biblical connections between the two haplogroup brothers. And so tonight, we're going to do a compare and a contrast between haplogroup E and J. Which one of these haplogroups has the best chance at being the haplogroup of Shem, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and of course the Israelites. So let's begin. All right. Haplogroup E versus J. We learned a lot so far about haplogroup E and J. Now let's compare and contrast what we've learned. Which haplogroup has the best chance of being the progenitor of Afro-Asiatics? Remember, it's important to know the Y-DNA haplogroup of Proto-Afro-Asiatics and Proto-Semites because they would be the ancestors of the ancient Hebrews of Israel. The Israelites are a Semitic people, and their ancestors would be Proto-Semites. Semitic is part of the Afro-Asiatic family. According to the genealogy of the Hebrews, they descend from Shem, Shem being the father of the Semitic Afro-Asiatic people. Also, keep in mind why DNA haplogroups are important because they are passed down from father to son. Since the genealogy of Israel is paternal from Shem to Abraham, looking at haplogroups is important for our understanding of their lineage. So remember, a haplogroup is a genetic population group of people who share a common ancestor on either their paternal or maternal line. Particular haplogroups are associated with well-known ancestral groups such as the Vikings, Australian Aboriginals, and the Celts. The paternal haplogroup relates to your Y chromosome, and since that is the sex-determining chromosome for men, it is passed down from father to son. As women don't have a Y chromosome, they will not have a paternal haplogroup by default. However, they are able to find out what their paternal haplogroup is if a male relative from their father's side, ideally a father, brother, uncle, or grandfather, is also tested. And so this is what we're looking at as the paternal DNA. And the Israelites were a confederation of Iron Age Semitic-speaking tribes of the ancient Near East. The Hebrew people are mostly taken as synonymous with the Semitic-speaking Israelites. And if we look at Genesis chapter 10 or chapter 11, we see that this is the genealogy of Shem. Shem was 100 years old, begot Arphaxad 2 years after the flood. After he begot Arphaxad, Shem lived 500 years and begot sons and daughters. And then you go from Arphaxad to Shelah to Eber, Peleg, Ru, Serg, Nahor, Terah lives 70 years and begot Abraham. So we are dealing with a paternal lineage, a male lineage going all the way back from Abraham all the way back to Shem. So we are dealing with a male line. And then from Abraham, you have Isaac, Jacob, and the Israelites. And of course, we know that the Hebrew language comes from the Semitic language, going all the way back to the Proto-Semitic people and language group. And of course, we know that Afro-Asiatic and Semitic are one and the same, of relating to or being a family of languages widely distributed over Southwest Asia and Africa, including the Semitic. And Semitic of relating to are constituting a subgroup of the Afro-Asiatic family that includes Hebrew. So Semitic, Afro-Asiatic, one and the same. Semitic comes from Afro-Asiatic, and it is an Afro-Asiatic language. So therefore, which haplogroup, E or J, has the best chance of being the progenitor of Afro-Asiatic Semites? So let's look into the origins of Afro-Asiatic. Where did Proto-Afro-Asiatic come from? Proto-Semitic is a hypothetical reconstructed proto-language ancestral to the Semitic languages. There is no consensus regarding the location of the Proto-Semitic homeland. Scholars hypothesize that it may have originated in the Levant, the Sahara, or the Horn of Africa, and the view that it arose in the Arabian Peninsula has also been common historically. So here are the different homelands. You have the Horn of Africa, the Eastern Sahara, and the Levant. So the Semitic family is a member of the larger Afro-Asiatic family, all of whose other 5 or more branches have their origin in North Africa or the Maghreb. Largely for this reason, the ancestors of Proto-Semitic speakers were originally believed by some to have first arrived in the Middle East from North Africa, possibly as part of the operation of the Saharan pump around the late Neolithic. Dinkoff sees Semitic originating between the Nile Delta and Canaan as the northernmost part of the Afro-Asiatic branch of Afro-Asiatic. Bench even wonders whether the highly derivative the Goreg languages indicate an origin in Ethiopia, with the rest of Ethiopic Semitic a later back migration. According to Christy G. Turner II, there is an archaeological and physical anthropological reason for a relationship between the modern Semitic-speaking populations of the Levant and the Natopian culture. So basically, you have some saying that Semites originate in North Africa, which is in red. In green, he believes Semites originated basically around the area of the Nile Valley in Canaan. And in blue, Bench, he believes that Semites could have originated in Ethiopia. And Christie believes in yellow right here that Semites could have originated with the Natufians. So the origins of Afro-Asiatic basically being the Horn of Africa, the Eastern Sahara, North Africa, and the Levant Natufian culture. These are the major locations for the origins of Afro-Asiatics. When did Proto-Afro-Asiatic come into existence? Now that we know the locations in which Afro-Asiatics first emerged, now it's important to know the time period in which Afro-Asiatic emerged. When did Proto-Afro-Asiatic come into existence in the Horn and in the Horn of Africa and the Eastern Sahara? This extensive, well-grounded linguistic research places the Afro-Asiatic homeland in the southeastern Sahara or adjacent Horn of Africa. And when all of Afro-Asiatic branches are included, strongly indicate a pre-food producing Afro-Asiatic economy. A careful reading of Dinkoff shows his continuing adherence to his long-held position of an exclusively African origin for the family. He explicitly describes Proto-Afro-Asiatic vocabulary as consistent with non-food producing vocabulary and links it to the pre-Neolithic cultures, again, the pre-Neolithic cultures in Levant and in Africa, south of Egypt, noting the latter to be older. Dinkoff does revise his location for the common Semitic homeland, moving it from entirely within Northeast Africa to areas straddling the Nile Delta in Sinai, but continues to place the origins of the 5 other branches of the Afro-Asiatic family wholly in Africa. One interpretation of the archaeological data supports a pre-food producing population movement from Africa into the Levant, consistent with the linguistic arguments for a pre-Neolithic migration, again, pre-Neolithic migration of pre-Proto-Semitic speakers out of Africa via Sinai. So when it comes to the origins of Afro-Asiatic, the time period when it comes to the Horn of Africa and Eastern Sahara, some people place it in the pre-Neolithic period. And again, here is just a visual representation of where these early Proto-Afro-Asiatics would have migrated out of when it comes to Africa. Some going through the Red Sea, going into Yemen, and others going through the Red Sea, going through Sinai, as you can see. 2 different routes that they could have entered out of. Here's just a visual representation of the Afro-Asiatics being on the coast of the Red Sea and migrating into the Middle East and deeper into Africa. So Proto-Afro-Asiatic came into existence in pre-Neolithic. If you go with the Horn of Africa and Eastern Sahara time period. So when did Proto-Afro-Asiatic come into existence in North Africa? Proto-Semitic maintained for a certain time closer language connection with the Lasio-Berber and with Cushitic. This implies that speakers of Proto-Semitic were dwelling in Africa in the 5th millennium BC in the Neolithic, 5,500 through 3,500 BC, when the Saharas climate was much wetter. So that erosion took place as in other moist, temperate, and subtropical regions, and there was a proper system of rivers and vegetation consisting of grass and trees. The worsening of environmental conditions is indicated in North Africa circa 3,500 BC, with disappearance of vegetation and major faunal break, desertification, and desertification. This might have been the period when the speakers of Proto-Semitic passed through the Nile Delta from the west to the east and reaching Western Asia, where written documents of the 3rd millennium BC preserved noticeable traces of pre-Semitic, and in Mesopotamia, also a pre-Sumerian substream. Thus, from North Africa, wave after wave of Semitic migrations would seem to have set forth. The earliest of these migrants and those who went further to the east were the Akkadians, who journeyed along the Fertile Crescent through Palestine and Syria, and crossing over into Mesopotamia, reached northern Babylon circa 3000 BC and founded the first Semitic empire at Kish. The southern Semites would seem to have reached the moister highlands of Yemen in the Hadrat after 2000 BC, following the collapse of the early Bronze Age culture in Palestine, while the Ethiopians would have crossed over to the Horn of Africa when drier conditions prevailed in South Arabia, circa 15,000 through 500 BC. The Lasio-Berbers continued instead to occupy the original language area of the speakers of Afro-Asiatic. Their African origins may even be confirmed by a relationship of Afro-Asiatic with Bantu languages, which form the central group of the large Niger-Congo family. So let's go to the next one. So the Semitic family is a member of the larger Afro-Asiatic family, all of whose other 5 or more branches have their origin in North Africa or the Maghreb. Largely for this reason, the ancestors of Proto-Semitic speakers were originally believed by some to have first arrived in the Middle East from North Africa, possibly as part of the operation of the Saharan pump around the late Neolithic. And here's a visual representation to the right of that, those Semites coming out of North Africa to the Levant. So the sub-pump theory is a hypothesis that explains how fauna and flora migrated into Eurasia and Africa via a land bridge in the Levant region. It possesses the extended periods of ambient rainfall lasting many thousands of years in Africa are associated with the wet green Sahara phase during the larger lakes and more rivers existed. Here's a visual representation of that. So when it comes to Proto-Afro-Asiatic in the North Africa, this would have been around the time of the Neolithic period. So again, we're trying to figure out what time period are Proto-Afro-Asiatics coming into existence, depending on the region. So when did Proto-Afro-Asiatic come into existence in the Levant with the Natufians? Given the modern distribution of Semitic languages over the area in question, which belong to the larger Afro-Asiatic family, it seems appropriate to suggest that these first farmers of the Levant and their Mesolithic predecessors, including the Natufian culture, were speaking a Proto-Afro-Asiatic language. It may be that Proto-Semitic continued to develop within the Levant and Syria area, since both Ebelite and Akkadian, early Semitic languages, are there attested early, the former around 2400 BC. Afro-Asiatic, these languages, this language family consists of 6 branches, 5 including ancient Egyptian confined to North Africa, 1 Semitic, also extending in ancient times to Southwest Asia, and that distribution suggests an African origin for the family, whose Semitic branch might then have spread into Southwest Asia. But the overwhelmingly archaeologically attested flow of domesticated crops and animals from the Neolithic times onward into Egypt and through the Arabian Peninsula into Ethiopia is out of Southwest Asia rather than out of Africa. That would make it surprising for Semitic languages to have spread against that stream. There are 2 principal competing hypotheses for the origin of Afro-Asiatic. One based on the reconstruction of the early vocabulary for cultural and environmental freedoms, places the homeland in the Levant during the early Neolithic, the late Neolithic culture, 9,500 BC, with the subsequent 2 prolonged spread by 5,000 BC. That is well documented archaeologically. Mixing farming across the Nile into Egypt and North Africa, giving rise to the Egyptian and Berber branches of Afro-Asiatic languages, and sheep and goats based pastoralism from Western Arabia across the Red Sea into Ethiopia and Sudan, giving rise to Cushitic, Omotic, and Chadic languages. Semitic spread into Ethiopia much later. That Southwest Asian origin would now be masked by language replacement in the homeland, including the spread of the Semitic branch of Afro-Asiatic languages, including Akkadian or Babylonian, Aramaic, and Arabic in historic times. So when it comes to the Levant origin for Afro-Asiatic, it seems that it would have been in the Mesolithic, early Neolithic, and late Neolithic periods. So the Horn of Africa / Eastern Sahara equals the pre-Neolithic for the origin of Afro-Asiatic. For North Africa, it will be the Neolithic. For the Levant and Natufian culture, it will be the Mesolithic, early Neolithic, or the late Neolithic. This is the time period and the locations in which Afro-Asiatics emerge. So why is this important? Understanding where and when Proto-Afro-Asiatic originated can give us an idea of the Y DNA chromosomes of these early Afro-Asiatics, which would include Proto-Semitic ancestors of Israel. Therefore, what haplogroup was in these locations at that time when Proto-Afro-Asiatics first emerged? Where was haplogroup E and J at the time and location of Proto-Afro-Asiatic origins? Remember, Horn of Africa / Eastern Sahara, pre-Neolithic, North Africa, Neolithic, Levant / Natufian culture, Mesolithic, early Neolithic, and late Neolithic. So, why DNA origins of haplogroup J? The first J1 men living in the late upper Paleolithic, shortly before the end of the last ice age, and the last ice age, the oldest identified J1 sample to date comes from Serbia cave, 13,200 BCE in Georgia, placing the origins of J1 in all likelihood in the region around the Caucasus, Zagros, Tartarus, and Eastern Anatolia during the Upper Paleolithic. Like many other successful lineages from the Middle East, J1 is thought to have undergone a major population expansion during the Neolithic period. Found that the greatest genetic diversity of the J1 haplotypes was found in Eastern Anatolia near Lake Van in central Kurdistan. The mountainous terrain of the Caucasus, Anatolia, and modern Iran, which wasn't suitable for early cereal farming, was an ideal ground for goat and sheep herding, and catalyzed the promulgation of J1 pastoralists. Having colonized most of the Anatolia, J1 herders would have settled in the mountainous region of Europe, including the southern Balkans and the Carpathians, central and southern Italy, and Sicily and Sardinia, southern France, and most of the Iberian Peninsula. Haplogroup J2 is thought to have appeared somewhere in the Middle East towards the end of the late Glacian, between 15,000 and 22,000 years ago. The oldest known J2A samples at present were identified in remains from the Hotu cave in northern Iran, dating from 9,100 through 8,600 BCE, and the Katos cave in Georgia, dating from 7,940 through 7,600 BCE. This confirms that haplogroup J2 was already found in the Caucasus and the Caspian region during the Mesolithic period. Haplogroup J is predominant in Iran, where both its subclades J2A-M172 and J1-M267 are observed. Its highest frequency are registered in the populations located along the southwestern coast of the Caspian Sea and along the Zagros mountain range. Exceptionally high is the frequency observed in the Balachi and Sarstian Baluchistan, and in agreement with their likely Caspian Sea origin. The J1B-F4306 and J1A2-PH77 branches split off at the very beginning. These are rare lineages distributed mostly among ancient and modern populations in the Caucasus, the Armenian highlands, Iran, and Pakistan. Interestingly, the 13,000-year-old hunter-gatherer from the southern Caucasus belongs to J1B-F4306. The J1A-Z18375 branch has a geographic distribution subsequently overlapping with that of the J1-F4306 and J1A2-PH77 branches. The J1A1B-Z18375 branch is overwhelmingly among ancient and modern populations from the Caucasus, the Armenian highlands, Iran, and Anatolia. This branch constitutes the aforementioned peak of haplogroup J1-M267 frequency in the Northeast Caucasus. Haplogroup J1-M267 were found among populations living in the Caucasus and neighboring regions. Our Bayesian continuous phylogenetic analysis suggests the origin of haplogroup J1-M267 in West Asia, confirming previous assumptions. Most of the deeply derived lineages belong to the population from the northern latitudes of the region, in line with the finding of the late Paleocene hunter-gatherer from the Southern Caucasus. Our analysis provided better statistical confidence for the origin of haplogroup J1-M267 in the area compassing the Caucasus, the Armenian highland, and the Zagros mountains. Here's a visual representation of where the oldest J markers are and where J likely originated. So, the origins of haplogroup E. Geographical distribution of these sub-Saharan African lineages in the Arabian Peninsula seem to indicate a notable portion of these lineages that participate in the building of the primitive Arabian population. The presence of two underived M96 Saudi lineages raised interesting questions related to the micro-haplogroup DE-YAP geography. Regions near but external to Northeast Africa, like the Levant or Southern Arabian Peninsula, could have served as an impetus for the early desertification of non-African unpaternal haplovarieties like Y chromosome DE-YAP star. This model would imply that both CF-P143 and the DE-YAP evolved nearby but outside Africa, with DE-YAP star ancestor would have spread to Asia and evolved into haplogroup D, while other DE-YAP star returned to Northeast Africa and evolved into E. Curiously, ancestral E star lineages have been detected in the Arabian Peninsula and the Levant. The expansion of Neolithic farmers from the Middle East into Europe is also represented in the NRY data, although suggesting a relatively localized area of impact. As mentioned before in relation to Africa, NRY history, a Mesolithic population carrying group 3 lineages with the E-M35-/M215 mutation expanded northwards from sub-Saharan to North Africa and the Levant. The Levantine population of farmers were distributed into Europe during and after the Neolithic, carried these African group 3 M35/M215 lineages. Group 3 lineages are found at high frequencies in Africa and relatively high frequencies in the Middle East and Southern Europe, characterized by the M35-M215 mutation, with occasional occurrences in Central Asia, Pakistan, and America. Most notably, the PN2 transition unites two high-frequency subclades defined by E-M2 PN1/M180 mutations in sub-Saharan Africa and M35/M215 in North and East Africa, the Mediterranean basin, and Europe. We suggest that a population with this subclade of the African YAP/M145/M203/PN2 cluster expanded into the southern and eastern Mediterranean at the end of the Paleocene. These lineages would have been introduced then from the Middle East into Southern Europe, and to a lesser extent, northern India and Pakistan, by farmers during the Neolithic expansion. Here's another paper. The role of the Levant in the Neolithic dispersal of the E3B1-M35 sublineages is supported by the data. So here is E1B1B basically originating and thriving in the Paleolithic Red Sea region. And here's just a visual representation of E basically expanding throughout Africa, the Middle East, and Europe. Here's another representation specifically dealing with the Levant and E spreading from the Levant. This was dealing with E spreading from the Horn of Africa or the Red Sea. And here's a different map that would show you E spreading from the Levant, because there are different places of origin and migrations. So where was haplogroup E and J at the time and location of Proto-Afro-Asiatic origins? Haplogroup J, as we just read, was found in Anatolia, Armenia, and Iran. And haplogroup E was found in the Red Sea region of the Levant, Northeast Africa, and Arabian Peninsula. In terms of geographical location and the time period for the origins of Afro-Asiatic, haplogroup E seems to have a far better chance than haplogroup J. Haplogroup J was not seen in a single location when Afro-Asiatics first emerged. Haplogroup E, on the other hand, has the most ancient presence in Afro-Asiatic locations. If you were to look at the oldest samples found in Afro-Asiatic locations, you have E-M81 found in Morocco. You have E-Z830 found in the Natufian samples in Israel. You have E-M35, one of the oldest samples found in the Jordan of the Levant. You have E-M78 found in Morocco as well in the Jordan. By the way, here are the, so here's Morocco, here's Natufian Israel, here's the Jordan, here's both Morocco and the Jordan. You have E-V22 found in Egypt. You have E-L610 found in, I don't know where that, I think this is in Europe. This is in the Balkans. And then you have E-V13 found in Bulgaria, Croatia. So all the places where heavy Afro-Asiatic speakers are, you find the most oldest samples of E. And to this day, it's still widely dominated by E. So when you look at the homelands of Afro-Asiatic, the Horn of Africa, the Eastern Sahara, and the Levant. They are far from the location where haplogroup J originated. The Levant, Eastern Sahara, and the Horn of Africa is far from where haplogroup J originated. But haplogroup E dominates the locations where Afro-Asiatic originated in. As I just read earlier from this paper, Proto-Semitic either came from the Levant, the Sahara, the Horn of Africa, or Arabia, the Arabian Peninsula. And here are the scientists, the linguists that supports this: Metover, Erit, and Bench. Sorry if I butchered those names. So here's a visual representation of Afro-Asiatic languages and haplogroup E, and as we can see, they beautifully overlap each other. You have Berber, Egyptian, Semitic, Cushitic, Omotic, Chadic, and when you look at the E lineage and its distribution, it just overlaps Afro-Asiatic people. So the closest location between Afro-Asiatic and haplogroup J would be the Levant. But remember, time period is very important. Haplogroup J was nowhere in the Neolithic Levant. We find 0 Natufian or Neolithic Levantine farmer remains with J. With haplogroup J, we found none of them. Haplogroup J entered the Levant during the Bronze Age, when Afro-Asiatic speakers, including Semites, had already existed. Here's a paper that goes into this. These findings constitutes with both earlier Neolithic and Epipaleolithic Natopian populations, which were dominated by haplogroup E, and later Bronze Age individuals, all of whom belong to J. So E dominated the Levant in the Neolithic and Epipaleolithic, and J became to dominate the Levant during the Bronze Age. But there's more papers that say this. We compiled frequencies of Y chromosome haplogroups in this geographical area and their changes over time in the data set of ancient and modern Levantine populations. And note, similarly to lizards, that haplogroup J was absent in all Natufian and Neolithic Levantine males examined thus far, but emerged during the Bronze Age in Lebanon and the Jordan, along with their related Iranian Chalcolithic DNA. So if we look at the Levant/Natufians as the origin of Afro-Asiatics, which would be a bit closer to where J was in the Anatolia, Armenia, and Iran, still, the first Afro-Asiatic speakers in the Neolithic Levant would not have carried haplogroup J. Haplogroup J, as I just said, is the closest place that you could probably say, the Levant is the closest place you can probably say for J, but still, no matter how close J is even to the Levant, where Afro-Asiatic originated in, we still don't find the samples there until the Bronze Age. So, but rather haplogroup E is a better chance because it's just dominating the region. And if haplogroup J wasn't in the Levant in the Neolithic era, then it definitely wasn't in any of the other locations where Afro-Asiatics were supposed to have emerged, such as the Horn of Africa, the Eastern Sahara, or North Africa. Haplogroup J is pretty much absent around the time Afro-Asiatic is supposed to emerge, supposed to come into existence. Basically what I'm trying to get across. As I said and showed many times. So even if we look at the Levant/Natufians as the origins of Afro-Asiatic, which is a bit closer to where haplogroup J was in Anatolia and I actually Should go to the next one. All right, but let's continue our comparing and contrasting between haplogroup E and J. Let's shift our focus for a minute on phenotype. What would early Proto-Afro-Asiatic people look like if they originated in the pre-Neolithic era of the Horn of Africa / Eastern Sahara, or in Neolithic North Africa, or in Mesolithic, early Neolithic, late Neolithic, Levant, Natufian? How would they look? So Proto-Afro-Asiatic phenotype. What would a Proto-Afro-Asiatic phenotype be in pre-Neolithic era Horn of Africa? So here is again a map showing you kind of where they would have been. And here is a phenotype. So this is the Omotic, probably a relic of the pre-Neolithic periods. Again, we're dealing with the pre-Neolithic. Dark brown skin, kinky curly hair, usually dolichocephalic, bit of a broad nose, lips are full, and cheeks and cheekbones are prominent. Now, what would a Proto-Afro-Asiatic phenotype be in the pre-Neolithic Eastern Sahara? Again, visualization of where these early Afro-Asiatics would have been in the Eastern Sahara, if this model is true. They probably would have had a northern Ethiopic phenotype common along the Red Sea coast of the Nile Valley from Egypt to Eritrea and deep into the Ethiopian highlands, often blends of the Arabics and Yemenites that arrived in prehistoric times, sometimes in Arabia as well. Dark, sometimes medium bronze brown skin, tightly curly hair. So what would Proto-Afro-Asiatic phenotype be in the Neolithic era of North Africa? Again, here's a visualization of these Proto-Afro-Asiatics if they originated in North Africa in the Neolithic. This is how they would have spread. What's their phenotype? They would have had a Saharan Ethiopic phenotype, Ethiopic type that was more common during the Neolithic when the Sahara was still green. Reddish brown to black skin, tightly curly hair, dolichocephalic mesophalic skull structure. What would the Proto-Afro-Asiatic phenotype be during the Neolithic era of the Levant, of the Natufian culture? Again, here is where the Natufians would have been, and here's the spread of them. So it is a further surprise that the Epipaleolithic Natufian of Israel, from whom the Neolithic realm was assumed to arise, has a clear link to sub-Saharan Africa. And that's a Natufian reconstruction. All right, so the Afro-Asiatic phenotype in Mesolithic and Neolithic Africa / Levant is the exact opposite of what the people would have looked like in places like Anatolia, Armenia, and Iran, where haplogroup J originated. Because remember, we're dealing with Mesolithic and Neolithic populations. As I said earlier, these are rare lineages distributed mostly among ancient and modern populations from the Caucasus, the Armenian highland, Iran, and Pakistan. This is the region that we're dealing with. So they would have had an Armenoid phenotype. I've been over the Armenoid phenotype. This phenotype is seen in Armenia and Anatolia. Basically, they have hooked noses, black hair, brown eyes, a round skull. And of course, the Armeniid type seen in Asia Minor with ancient Cretians and Hittites, common in people like Armenians and Turks and Lebanese and so on and so forth. Black hair, dark eyes, hooked nose, white skin, tan skin. And the Anatolid type, again, very similar to the Armenid type, dark hair, dark eyes, tan to white skin, round skull. And the Indo-Iranian type tends to be a bit more tanned, dark hair, dark eyes, features like this. With that being said, let's continue our let's continue our compare and contrast on the genetic level. What is the best location for the origins of Afro-Asiatics, both for a young Earth model and an old Earth model? The best location for Afro-Asiatic origins is the Neolithic Levant with the Natufian culture. This is why I tend to, this is what my model would be. The Natufian Afro-Asiatic origins, I like this one the most. The Natufians, according to most anthropologists, are believed to have been the best representatives of the Proto-Afro-Asiatics. They lived in the Levant during the Neolithic period and would be the world's first farmers. Their culture was overwhelmingly pastoralism and agricultural. The Proto-Afrosan speakers can be identified with high probability with the creators of the Natufian and post-Natufian early Neolithic archaeological culture of the Levant. The identification of Proto-Afrosans as Natufians and post-Natufians seems to satisfy all four criteria. Besides the farming lexicon, there are a set of reconstructed Proto-Afrosan terms pointing to the intercept animal breeding. Finally, the Levant appears to be an attested region from where populations began to spread starting in the early Neolithic, covering not only wide tracts of southwestern Asia, but also the adjacent parts of the Mediterranean and Africa. In the 2005 book, First Farmers, The Origins of Agricultural Societies by Peter Bellwood provides an excellent resource for linguists who wish to explore the worldwide correlation between the origins of agriculture and expansion of languages. Prior to the adoption of agriculture in Southwest Asia and elsewhere in the world, for that matter, the human tribe practiced hunter-gatherer techniques in order to survive. The evolution of agriculture in Southwest Asia generally follows a series of cultural transitions that begin with the Natufians, followed by the pre-pottery Neolithic A and pre-pottery Neolithic B, and then finally the development of pottery itself. The Natufians shared as an important cultural transition because they were the last hunter-gatherers in the Middle East. The Natufians appeared near the Sea of Galilee in what is now present-day Israel. The Afro-Asiatic language family consists of 376 languages. These languages are distributed throughout the Middle East, as well as in North Africa, East Africa, and Central West Africa. Afro-Asiatic is subdivided into 6 main branches: Egyptian, Semitic, Chadic, Cushitic, Omotic, and Berber. A long-standing opinion among linguists, such as Eric in 2004, placed the prehistoric origins of Afro-Asiatic languages somewhere in East Africa. Interestingly, linguistic data may also support this model for Afro-Asiatic origins using linguistic construction. Miltov in 2002 presents a Proto-Afro-Asiatic lexicon of farming techniques. Based on the reconstructions, he suggests that the Natufians, agriculture, and Afro-Asiatic co-evolved in Southwest Asia. Finally, another reason for identifying Southwest Asia as a punitive homeland of Afro-Asiatic languages is the Y chromosomes found at present below section 4 and 5. So now comparing this information with Caucasus hunter-gatherers, they were living in the Caucasus. They had not entered the Levant yet and had a different culture and language from the Natufians, which was likely a pre-Proto-Indo-European. We extend the scope of European paleogenomics by sequencing the genome of late Upper Paleolithic 13,000 years old and Mesolithic 9,700 years old males from Western Georgia and the Caucasus, and the late Upper Paleolithic 13,700-year-old male from Switzerland. While we detect late Paleolithic, Mesolithic genomic continuity in both regions, we find that Caucasus hunter-gatherers belong to a distinct ancient clade that split from Western hunter-gatherers 45,000 years ago, shortly after the expansion of autotomically modern humans into Europe and from the ancestors of Neolithic farmers 25,000 years ago, around the last glacial maximum. Caucasus hunter-gatherer genomes significantly contributed to the Yamnaya steppe herders who migrated into Europe 3000 BC, supporting a formative Caucasus influence on this important early Bronze Age culture. Caucasus hunter-gatherers left their imprint on modern populations from the Caucasus and also Central and South Asia, probably marking the arrival of Indo-Aryan languages. We sequenced a late Upper Paleolithic Sepserbian Setserbia from a Setserbia cave in a Mesolithic genome. From West Asia, it is at its very eastern boundary of Europe. We term these two individuals Caucasus hunter-gatherers, CHG. We show that Caucasus hunter-gatherer belong to a new distinct ancient clade that split from Western hunter-gatherers 45,000 years ago and from Neolithic farmer ancestors 25,000 years ago. This clade represents a previously undetermined source of ancestry of the Yamnaya and contributed directly to modern populations from the Caucasus all the way to Central Asia. The separation between Caucasus hunter-gatherer and both European farmers and Western hunter-gatherers ended during the early Bronze Age, when a major ancestral component linked to Caucasus hunter-gatherer was carried west by migrating herders from the Eurasian steppe. The foundation group for this systematic change was the Yamnaya, who we estimate owe half of their ancestry to Caucasus hunter-gatherer source. These sources may be linked to the Maykop culture, which predated the Yamnaya and was located further south, closer to the Southern Caucasus. Through the Yamnaya, the Caucasus hunter-gatherer ancestral strand contributed to most modern human populations, especially in the northern part of the continent. Finally, we found that Caucasus hunter-gatherer ancestry was also carried east to become a major contributor to the ancestral northern Indian component found in the Indian subcontinent. Exactly when the eastward movement occurred is unknown, but is likely included migration around the same time as the contribution to the Western European gene pool and may be linked to the spread of Indo-European languages. So, as we can see, Natufians and Caucasus hunter-gatherers lived in two completely different regions. Natufians were in the Levant, and Caucasus hunter-gatherers were in the Caucasus. One is considered to be the father of Afro-Asiatics, the Natufians, while the other is considered to be part of the spread of Indo-Europeans, Caucasus hunter-gatherers. Therefore, which one has the best chance as being the father of Semitic peoples? What do you think, Yeshub? And who do y'all think in the chat?
I think you asked me.
Yeah, I'm asking y'all in the chat. Put in the chat and you can say, Yeshub, who do you think has the best chance of being the ancestors of Afro-Asiatics, basing everything on what we said thus far?
All right, so everybody in the chat, put a 1 for Natufian and put a 2 for Caucasus hunter-gatherers if you guys are. Yeah, Natufians. That's 1 for Natufians. Russia and Washington says Natufians.
I agree. So far, that makes the most sense. So let's go further into this. Furthermore, let's look at the Y chromosome haplogroup and autosomal DNA. Y DNA haplogroup E. I'm going to let Yeshub take on this one while I get a sip of water.
All right. Looks like it was unanimous, by the way. Everyone's saying Natufians. So, paper report, haplogroup E report, the genetic linguistic interface, series 5 papers, language, prehistory for Y chromosome perspective, posted November 16, 2017 on genlinginterface.com. Says focusing now on the green cluster, figure 5.5.4 reflects that mutations within this cluster are variants of the EZ827 haplogroup. An interesting study from 2016, Lazarus et al. Was able to extract 3 ancient DNA samples from a Natufian archaeological site in Israel. As the reader may recall from section 2 above, the Natufians were the last hunter-gatherers of Southwest Asia. 2 of the samples belong to E-PF1961, which is an ancestral marker for EM34. The EM34 mutation has a wide distribution, currently found in populations of Mediterranean Europe, Southeastern Europe, the Middle East, North Africa, and East Africa. For linguists, the EM34 mutation is significant as it represents a potential back to Africa marker that co-expanded from Southwest Asia into East Africa with goat and sheep herders about 6,000 years ago. This Neolithic migration, as the reader may recall from section 3, appears to have carried Afro-Asiatic languages from Southwest Asia to East and North Africa. The ancient Natufian Y chromosome data, as just presented, supports this position because the EPF1961 mutation is an upstream marker from EM34. Thus, EM34 probably evolved in the Middle East. Additionally, analysis of contemporary genetic data also supports Middle Eastern and agricultural origins of Afro-Asiatic languages in East Africa. Cruciani et al. Suggested EM34 arose in the Levant based on their interpretation of the data and wider distribution of this marker outside of Africa. Additionally, Cardenas et al. Date the EM123 mutation in the Middle East to about 11,000 years ago, which potentially places the evolution of the downstream EM34 mutation during the Southwest Asian Neolithic.
Yes. And so here's the region of the Natufian culture. And all those red dots you see are various E samples, not just Natufian, but just E samples in general. So we have the Japheth cave where we find 5 samples here. And then you have the pre-pottery B, and we find 3 samples in the Jordan. You find a E sample in the Pekarian cave. And now let's look at Y-DNA haplogroup J. So both Georgian hunter-gatherer samples were assigned to haplogroup J, with Katos belonging to the sub-haplogroup J2A in the study exploring J haplogroups in 445 individuals from Eurasia. J2A was found at highest frequency in Georgia and Iraq. It is intriguing that both the mitochondrial and Y chromosome haplogroups of our ancient Georgian samples have been associated with the Neolithicization of Europe. Not the Middle East, but of Europe. This tentatively suggests a genetic link between Georgian hunter-gatherers and early European migrants from the Near East. Here is those 2 samples, by the way. And there's Georgia. So we got E Natopians all throughout. Not E. We have haplogroup E all throughout the Levant. And then we got Lonely J in Georgia. I'm just joking. Natopian Autosomal DNA. Let's look at their autosomal DNA. What are they made up of? So the Natufian sample consists of 61.2% Arabian, 21.2% Northern African, 10.9% Western Asian, and 6.8% Omotic ancestry. This is the genetic makeup of a Natufian autosomally. So let's look at Caucasus hunter-gatherer autosomal DNA. So Caucasus hunter-gatherer, here it is right here. They, of course, contributed to the Uinta, but let's look at them specifically. When it comes to ancient Caucasus populations, they tend to have Iranian Chalcolithic, Anatolian Chalcolithic, and Caucasus hunter-gatherer. So, as we can see, Natufians and Caucasus hunter-gatherers are genetically two completely different types of people. Natufians carry Y DNA haplogroup E, while Caucasus hunter-gatherers carry Y DNA haplogroup J. Autosomally, Natufians were more of a split between Africans and Asiatics, specifically Arabians. Genetically, they are perfect for that ancient Afro-Asiatic type. I do find it interesting that Natufians are pretty much split in between African and Arabian genetically. Whereas Caucasus hunter-gatherers are more Caucasian, Anatolian, and Iranian. Genetically, they are the perfect ancient example of an Indo-European of the Near East. Therefore, which one has the best chance of being the father of Semitic peoples? In the chat, put 1 for Natufian, put 2 for Caucasus hunter-gatherer. Yeshub, you can give your thoughts on that. Try to be a little bit interactive with these next video.
Yeah, I mean, right here, I mean, it's clear about the Caucasus hunter-gatherer group, right? You brought up earlier about these people, carrying the Indo-European, the type of phenotypes they will have, and then the genetic signatures that we find amongst them, haplogroup J being one of them, and we can see it dispersed. Same thing with Natufians. We made arguments about the Natufians, and we can see that the primary haplogroup that they had amongst them would have been E. And you actually brought out a slide earlier that, pretty much comports with that, haplogroup E dominating the Levantine populations for more than 10,000 years, from the Epipaleolithic all the way to the Neolithic, which is the Stone Age, the end of the Stone Age. And we don't start seeing J markers until the Chalcolithic and the introgression within that. What's interesting about that is what you brought up earlier with the Matani Empire. At the same time, we start seeing the Matani Empires, rule around 4000 BC. Then the Chalcolithic turning into the Bronze Age, we start seeing these J markers come in, and these would be your Indo-Europeans.
Yep. And so, furthermore, let's look at their phenotype. Let's return back to phenotype. So, the Natopian phenotype. By going off their autosomal DNA, we know that we're dealing with a Neolithic era. So, when there's 61% Arabian, 21% North African, 10% West Asian, and 6% Omotic, we have to keep in mind that we're dealing with the Neolithic population. So they're like 61% Neolithic Arabian, 21% Neolithic North African, 10% Neolithic West Asian, and 6% Neolithic Omotic. So what would this look like? Well, here is a ancient Arabian phenotype, what they believe is the closest ancient Arabian phenotype, found in places of southern Arabia, where they are more pure, I guess you can say. And here, of course, I went over the North African phenotype, the Eastern Saharid, the Saharid Ethiopid. Here is the Omotic. We went over them, how they have a Neolithic phenotype that still resides with these people. And many people don't know, but early West Asians did resemble Africans. This study goes into that. Early Western Asians had more of an African look to them. There's a Natufian to your right of the screen. So with all that being said, looking at the autosomal DNA of Natufians, we can find, we can get a good idea that these people would have been a mixture of Neolithic Africans and Neolithic Arabians. So again, they're like a perfect split in between, like an Afro-Asiatic person, African and Asiatic. They're that perfect example of that. So if you put all the phenotypes together, the Arabian, the Omotic, the North African, if you were to sort of like blend this together, I don't have a good example of how to blend it, but basically it would have been a dark-haired people, dark-eyed people, dark-skinned people. So that's if you put it all together, sort of mix that up. But there are also studies that deal specifically with the phenotype of Natufians as well, such as this study. It says it is a further surprise that the Epipaleolithic Natopian of Israel, from whom the Neolithic realm was assumed to have arisen, has a clear link to sub-Saharan Africa. Interestingly enough, however, a small Natopian sample falls between the Niger-Congo group and other samples used. This placement suggests that there may have been a sub-Saharan African element in the makeup of Natopians, as shown in Figure 1. The Somalis, the Bronze Age, the Egyptian Bronze Age sample from Naquata may also hint to a sub-Saharan African component. If the late Paleocene Natopian sample from Israel is the source from which that Neolithic spread was derived, then there was clearly a sub-Saharan African element present of almost equal importance to the late prehistoric Eurasian element. Of Natufian, and to me, he looks a lot like common. The nose, the lips, the jaw structure. I believe that this Natufian sample looks like common, in my opinion. So basically, Natufians look like Africans, basically. So what about the Caucasus hunter-gatherer phenotype? What would these guys look like? So as we just said, Caucasus hunter-gatherers would have Anatolian Chalcolithic DNA and Iranian DNA. And as I've been over many times before, the Armenoid phenotype best fits the phenotype of perhaps a Caucasus hunter-gatherer, mixing it with the Anatolian type and with the Indo-Iranian type. And when you mix these phenotypes together, this is sort of what you'll get. You'll basically get a white to tan skin looking person, perhaps with a more curvature of the nose, black hair, dark eyes, things of that nature, if you were to mix it all together. But we also have studies that deal with the phenotype of Caucasus hunter-gatherers. When it comes to their skin tone, for instance, light skin actually originates with them. I'll just quickly read this. To explore further, we looked at the genomes in two pigmentations proposed to have been strongly selected by the ancestors of modern Europeans, namely SLC45A2 and SLC24A5. Selected SNPs in the SLC4A52 and the SLC24A5 genes contributed to lightening of skin and also fixed in modern Europeans. So they would have had light skin. We found that the Katos and the Satsurbia have an ancestral version of the SLC45A2 variant, but both Caucasus hunter-gatherers the selected version of the SLC24A5 gene. And skipping on down, we find it most likely in Balench, Katos, and Satsurbia had black or dark hair and brown eyes, basically what I just said. This is probably a good example of a Caucasus hunter-gatherer. So, as we can see, Natufians and Caucasus hunter-gatherers are phenotypically two completely different peoples. Autosomally, Natufians split between Neolithic Africans and Neolithic Arabians. Obviously, this would affect their phenotype, and phenotypically, Natufians looked African. Autosomally, Caucasus hunter-gatherers are more Caucasian, Anatolian, and Iranian. So obviously, this would affect their phenotype, and phenotypically, they are more Near Eastern European looking. To sum everything up, Natufians are dark, brown-skinned people because they didn't have the mutation for white skin. This is also something we have to keep in mind. They did not have that white skin mutation. Caucasus hunter-gatherers were white-skinned people because they had the mutation for light skin. Therefore, which one has the best chance of being the father of Semitic peoples? Quickly put in the chat 1 for Natufians and 2 for Caucasus hunter-gatherers. I'm going to just sort of move on. According to the ancient Hebrew, Christian, and Muslim texts, the descendants of Shem and Japheth were described as looking very, very different. Interestingly, the way that Shem is described matches one of the groups we mentioned. Also, Japheth matches another ethnic group we mentioned as well. This is from the rabbinic Hebrew tradition of Rabbi Pekah de Eleazar. I hope I pronounced that right. He says, he blessed Shem and his sons, black but calmly, and he gave them the inhabitable earth. And now for Japheth, he blessed Japheth and his sons. They are entirely white, and he gave them for an inheritance the desert and its fields. These are the inheritance with which he endowed them. Sorry. This is from a Muslim writer, Al-Tabri, from the book The History of the Messengers and the Kings. He says, the children of Sam or Shem settled in the center of the earth, which is between the Satrap and the sea, and between Yemen and Syria. Allah made the prophets from them, revealed the books to them, made them beautiful, gave them a black complexion, luminous and free and free of blemish. Now, what does he say about Japheth? The children of Japheth settle in the Safwan toward the north. They are light-skinned and very fair-skinned. This is from the Persian historian Tepri. He says about Shem, born to Noah were Shem, whose descendants' colors are a black complexion with a light brownish undertone and a dark blackish brown. What does he say about Japheth? Japheth, whose descendants are very fair-skinned and olive-skinned. This is from Ibn Abbadis, a famous Arabic scholar. He says about Shem and Ham, Allah made both the descendants of Sam and the descendants of Ham black-skinned. What does he say about Japheth? And he made the descendants of Japheth white-skinned. And this is from 13th century Christian Ibn al-Bari, or also known as Bar Hypercurious. What does he say about Shem? Shem, the land of the browns. What does he say about Japheth? Japheth, the land of the reds. Skin tone-wise, Natufians best fit Shem, whereas Caucasus hunter-gatherers skin tone best fits Japheth. Therefore, as I said multiple times, who has the best chance at being the ancestors of Semites? And there's gonna be so many ones throughout this whole video, but y'all can just put a 1 if you want. You don't have to do it again, but put a 1 for Natufians and a 2 for Caucasus hunter-gatherers. You don't have to if you don't want to. Anyways, so let's get deeper into the archaeology. This paper makes an additional inference, since there is archaeological and physical anthropological reason to believe that the Natufians were related to modern Semitic-speaking peoples of the Levant. Again, Natufians were related to modern Semitic-speaking peoples of the Levant. Anthropologists believe that Natufians are likely the ancestors of Semites. Anthropologists have never, I repeat, have never claimed Caucasus hunter-gatherers as being the ancestors of Semites. Since it's generally believed that Natufians are the ancestors of Semites, then knowing their Y-DNA is important. So what is the Y-DNA of Natufians? This paper goes into that. Such a scenario would also explain the presence of Y chromosome haplogroup E in the Natufians and Levantine farmers, a common link between the Levant and Africa. Here's another paper. Craniometric analysis has suggested an affinity between the Natufians and the population north or sub-Saharan Africa, a result that finds some support from Y chromosome analysis, which shows that Natufians and the successor Levantine Neolithic populations carried haplogroup E of likely ultimate African origin, which has also been detected in which has not been detected in other ancient males from West Eurasia. Natufians have a strong African presence about them, but this is an interesting and important fact to note. It is believed that early Semites were Africans. There is a very strong ancient element between the Semitic and African race. For instance, in this book, Guns, Germs, and Steel, he says, Greenberg determined that Semitic languages really form only one of 6 or more branches of a much larger language family, Afro-Asiatic. Even the Semitic subfamily itself is mainly African, 12 of its 19 surviving languages being confined to Ethiopia. And this suggests that Afro-Asiatic arose in Africa and that only one branch of them spread to the Near East. Keep this in mind. Hence, it may have been Africa that gave birth to the languages spoken by the authors of the Old and New Testaments and the Quran, the moral pillars of Western civilization. And here's a actual paper that goes into Semitic languages, its origin. It says, our analysis of the Semitic language family produced a data phylogeny that estimates the origin of Semitic at approximately 4,000 through 400 through 7,400 years ago. These results indicate that the ancestor of all Semitic languages in our data set was being spoken in the Near East no earlier than approximately 7,400 YBP, after having diverged from Afro-Asiatic in Africa. The discovery of such early Semitic languages could increase estimates of the age of Semitic and alter its geographical origin if these early Semitic languages were found in Africa rather than the Middle East. And it says right here, the map of Semitic languages. The map also presents a dispersal of Semitic languages inferred from our data and origin of Afro-Asiatic along the African coast of the Red Sea. You can see on the image to the left, supported by comprehensive analysis. It indicated in red, although other African origins of Afro-Asiatic has been proposed, such as Southwest Ethiopia, the assumed location of the divergence of ancestral Semitic from Afro-Asiatic between the African coast of the Red Sea and the Near East is indicated in italics. So here is sort of what they have. And Christopher Ehret even says, after all, the early Semites were just a few Africans arriving to find a lot of other people already in the area. Very interesting. So, with all that being said, geneticists do believe that Proto-Semites carried haplogroup E. Furthermore, the origins of Semitic in the Levant. Furthermore, this is also the place where Semitic originated in the Levant, in the homeland of Natopians. So, this paper goes into that. It says E-M34 is the main Middle Eastern variety of the E1B1b and is thought to have arrived with the Proto-Semitic people in the late Copper to early Bronze Age. So you do have geneticists that say E is Proto-Semitic. And this is around the same time of Semitic languages expanding. I'm going to read what's in red. It says, we estimate that Semitic had an early Bronze Age origin, 5,750 YBP in the Levant, followed by the expansion of Akkadian into Mesopotamia. So because of this, it's practically impossible for Caucasus hunter-gatherers' descendants with haplogroup J to be Proto-Semites. First of all, there is no evidence for Afro-Asiatic / Semitic languages being spoken in the Caucasus in the early Bronze Age. No evidence whatsoever. There is no proto-roots in those regions. Furthermore, haplogroup J males were just now entering the Levant when haplogroup E males had been in the Levant for thousands of years, already speaking Proto-Afro-Asiatic languages such as Proto-Semitic. So it's practically impossible for J to be Semitic in origin. As I said earlier, the Levant populations were dominated by haplogroup E, and later Bronze Age individuals carried haplogroup J into the region. As I said before, haplogroup J was absent in all Natufian and Neolithic Levantine males, but emerged in the Bronze Age in the Lebanon and Jordan, and they carried Iranian DNA with them. So when Semitic populations expanded from the Levant, such as, the Akkadians, they and many other Semitic groups would have been the ones to bring haplogroup E into Mesopotamia along with the Semitic tongue. As I just read before, we estimate that Semitic had an early Bronze Age origin in the Levant, followed by the expansion of Akkadian into Mesopotamia. What's interesting about this is that it does line up with does line up with haplogroup E. E-M123 originated some 19,000 years ago during the late Ice Age. Its place of origin is uncertain, but it was probably in the Red Sea region, somewhere between the southern Levant and Ethiopia. Its main subclade, E-M34, most probably emerged in the Levant about 15,000 years ago. Soon afterwards, M34 split into two branches, M84 and Z841, which were probably found in the Fertile Crescent during the Neolithic period. And this is the Fertile Crescent, by the way. The Fertile Crescent, the cradle of civilization, as people say. And so when you look at the migration of E into Mesopotamia, it does fit with that Akkadian expansion of Akkadians migrating from the Levant into Mesopotamia. All those dots you see are E samples, by the way. So, looking at Akkadians and Eastern Semitic speakers migrating into Mesopotamia from the Levant is further evidence that it could not have been men with haplogroup J. Like I said before, J was just now entering the Levant as Semites were migrating from the Levant into Mesopotamia. Furthermore, there is no evidence that Akkadians or Eastern Semitic speakers like Akkadians migrated from the Caucasus speaking any type of Afro-Asiatic language. There's no evidence of that. It's not just me saying haplogroup E is the father of Semites or that Akkadians brought haplogroup E into Mesopotamia. Anthropologists believe this as well. For instance, Peter Solomon Kovek, and you can see his credentials right here. My theory is that when Proto-Semitic language left the Afro-Asiatic homeland of Northeast Africa, not just one lineage left, but a group of Proto-Semitic people from this region that included all the Y-DNA haplogroups then present in Northeast Africa. It is possible that Northwest Semitic Hebrew people and languages dispersed into the Levant from Northeast Africa now region around 5,000 BCE. Thus, the earliest out of Africa settlement of Proto-Semitic people was likely in Yemen on the southeastern region of the Arabian Peninsula. They then spread to the east and northeast to enter Mesopotamia and found the Semitic kingdom of Akkad and the Akkadian Empire. In this group, many of us conclude that haplogroup E is one of the major founding haplogroups of the Semitic people, and that haplogroup E people were the ones who brought Proto-Semitic language out of the Afro-Asiatic homeland in Northeast Africa into the Levant in Mesopotamia. With that being said, if haplogroup E is Semitic, then who is haplogroup J? There are two different people are there two different people groups living in the land of Shem? DNA seems to imply this. Haplogroup E versus J, Shem versus Japheth. The descendants of the Natufians. So the closest modern day descendants to the Natufians are Arabians and Bedouins. This paper goes into this. It was published August 4th, 2021. The genomic history of the Middle East. It says Arabians and Bedouins are positioned close to ancient Levantines. When we substitute Levantine Neolithic with Natufians as source of ancestry in the Middle East, we found that Arabians could be successfully modeled. The Y haplogroup common in Natufians, E1b1b, is also frequent in our data set, with most lineages coinciding 8.3 KYA. Arabians acquire additional ancestry from a Natufian-related population. Arabia has higher African and Natufian-like ancestries. In addition, our models suggest that Arabians could have derived their ancestry from Natufian-like local hunter-gatherer populations instead of Levantine farmers. So, the modern descendants living, the modern day descendants living descendants of the Natufians are the Bedouins and the Arabians. This actually makes a lot of sense considering the high levels of Neolithic Arabian DNA that's actually found in Natufians. As I mentioned before, Natufians do have 61% Arabian DNA. So kind of makes sense Arabians be the closest people, Arabians and Bedouins. To this day, many Arabians and Bedouins still carry haplogroup E. Haplogroup J isn't the only Y-DNA haplogroup in the Middle East. Some people will have you believe that J is the only thing you see in the Middle East, but you do find E. For instance, in the same study, they point out all the various E haplogroups you find in the Middle East. We found a lot in Yemen and Arabian Peninsula specifically. If you look at the red and the blue, and they've been there for thousands of years, by the way, if you look at the time period right here. Here's another paper that actually goes into that. E-M34 lineages experienced a much more dramatic expansion during the Copper Age period. Also downstream of CTS1096 and Y4891 and Z21018 clades are typically found among people of Jewish ancestry, while PF6391 and Z21421 are found in the Levant, specifically like Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, Jordan, and the Arabian Peninsula. F1382 appears to have expanded during the Iron Age from the Levant, like we've been saying so far, to the Arabian Peninsula, where it is exclusively found today. So you do have various subclades of E that's found only in Arabia as well. Here is a map as well as the studies to the right that shows various groups with E. Yemenites and Jordanians, as an example, have a very high percentage of E, and these are the places where they got the samples from. Here's the high frequency map, E-M34, specifically of this one that I pulled out. So if you look up the if you look up on Family Tree DNA website and search Natufian Y-DNA classic or colorized chart, you will find many modern day Middle Easterners with haplogroup E. I'll only show you a few examples. So again, type in familytreedna.com, Natufians DNA -Y-DNA classic chart. And what it's going to show you is, I hope y'all can see it, but it shows a lot of E samples with modern day Middle Easterners. And I'll only screenshot a few of these charts because there are a lot of Middle Easterners have E. Hopefully y'all can kind of see, but you see right here, it shows the samples and it shows the place right here. Like here's dealing with a lot of Yemen. Here's dealing with Yemen, Iraq, and Arabia, and the samples are to the far left of each screenshot. Here's another one. This one, a lot of Lebanon, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, a lot of Saudi Arabia and Oman over here, Kuwait, a lot of Yemen, Saudi Arabia, stuff like that. A lot of E samples. So a lot of E is in the Middle East. Don't have people fool you. So here is E-M123 Y-DNA chart. Basically shows this specific subclade very heavy in the Arabian Peninsula, specifically quite heavy among the western side of the Arabian Peninsula and southern Arabia, as well as in the Levant. And it's all throughout the Middle East, North Africa, a little bit spilled into, Ethiopia. So phenotypically, Bedouins probably are a good example of what an ancient Semite would look like. If somebody were to ask me, what do I believe Shem and the early Semites look like? I think Bedouins are a good example. So let's look at some Bedouins. So here's a painting, well, not a painting, here's a drawing of some Bedouin girls from the 18th century, 1877, Arab Bedouin girls. They have very interesting hairstyles. Here are some Bedouins, pictures taken from Bedouins around, I think, the 19th century. Here's some more images. These are colorized. This is from like 1916. This is from 1921. These are Bedouins. Clearly, we're looking at dark-skinned people. Here are modern-day Bedouins. And to this day, they're still dark. A Bedouin girl right here. And here's a Bedouin man from the Jordan. A smiling Bedouin camel herder. So I think these are good examples of different examples of Semites, what they would have looked like. Here's another example of a Bedouin family in Oman, dealing with dark, brown-skinned people, black hair, dark eyes. So now let's compare this to the other ethnic types that lived in the Middle East. Because remember, our question is, are there two types of people living in the land of Shem? Haplogroup E versus J, Shem versus Japheth. So, present-day Levantines were drawn Bronze Age Europeans. Arabs, Iraqi Kurds, and Assyrians appeared relatively closer to ancient Iranians. Very interesting. We found an ancestry related to ancient Iranians, and that is Eucratius today in all Middle Easterners. Previous studies showed that this ancestry was not present in the Levant during the Neolithic period, but appeared in the Bronze Age, again, back to the Bronze Age, where 50% of the local ancestry was replaced by a population carrying ancient Iranian-related ancestry. So a population of people came in the Bronze Age and replaced it, and they had a lot of Iranian DNA. And so it says down here, this population potentially introduced the Y chromosome haplogroup J1 into the region. So this Iranian DNA is linked to the haplogroup J1. Very interesting. So as we can see, modern Middle Easterners are related to ancient Iranian populations. Furthermore, these populations brought haplogroup J. This is very important to note. First of all, who are Iranians? Are ancient/modern Iranians Semitic in origin? If you look at the Indo-European tree, you will find that Iranians are actually Indo-European. So beginning with Proto-Indo-European comes Proto-Indo-Iranian. From Proto-Indo-Iranian comes Proto-Indo-Aryan. Then Proto-Indo-Aryan splits into Indo-Aryan, as well as through Proto-Iranian. And from Proto-Iranian comes the Indo-Iranian languages. And from the Indo-Iranian languages comes the Iranian language of today, which is an Indo-European language. And Iranian peoples are an ethno-linguistic group of Indo-Europeans. The Proto-Iranians are believed to have emerged as a separate branch of the Indo-Iranians in Central Asia in the mid-2nd millennium BC. Haplogroup J-M172 is the most common haplogroup in Iran at 23%, almost exclusively represented by J2A-M4110 subclade at 93%, and other major subclade being J2B-M112. M12 appears from Iranians. Apart from Iranians, J2 is common in Arabs, Mediterranean, and Baltic peoples such as Serbs, Greeks, Albanians, Italians, Macedonians, Bulgarians, and Turks. In the Caucasus, Armenians, Georgians, Chechens, English, northeastern Turkey, northwestern Iran, Kurds, and Persians. Laos frequency drops suddenly beyond Afghanistan, Pakistan, and northern India. In Europe, J2A is common in the southern Greece and southern Italy, while J2B, J2-M12, is more common in Thracia, Macedonia, and central and northern Italy. Thus, J2A and the subgroups within it have a wide distribution from Italy to India, whilst J2A is mostly confined to the Balkans and Italy. And as I said before, J1 is predominant in Iran, with both its subclades J2 and J1 are observed. And as I said before, the oldest known J2A sample at present were identified in remains from the Hutu cave in northern Iran. Here is a picture of that. Here is a sample. Of course, here's the link if you want to learn more about it. So, ancient Iranians are not Semitic, but rather Indo-European. As a matter of fact, the word Iran comes from the word Aryan, which are also known to be Indo-European speakers. What people don't seem to know is that the Middle East, or the land of Shem, wasn't always populated by Semites. You also have Indo-Iranian or Aryan civilizations in the Middle East, such as the Matani Empire. The Matani Empire was actually in Syria, modern-day Syria. The Matani Indo-Iranian Empire centered in northern Mesopotamia that flourished from about 15,000 to about 1360 BC. The Matani was one of several kingdoms and small states, another being Huri, founded by the Indo-Iranians in Mesopotamia and Syria. Although originally these Indo-Iranians were probably members of Aryan tribes that later settled in India, they apparently broke off from a main tribe on their way and migrated to Mesopotamia instead. There they settled among the Hurrian peoples, who soon became the ruling nobility called the Mariani. The weakening of the Semitic states in Mesopotamia after 1550 enabled the Hurrians to penetrate deeper into this region, where they founded numerous small states in the eastern part of Anatolia, Mesopotamia, and Syria. The earliest evidence, preserved written evidence of the Aryan language, is found in documents relating to the kingdom of Mitanni in northern Syria, dated 15 through 13,000 BC. Proto-Indo-Aryan, which already clearly diverged from the Proto-Iranian, must have existed 1600 BC. As already mentioned, Belleroux in 1973 estimated that the separation of these two branches of Aryan began around 2000 BC at the latest. We also find, this is another book, we also find kings with Aryan names in Matani, which by the middle of the second millennium were largely Hurrian speaking. The Hittite text from early in the 16th century refers to petty kings with Aryan names in 3 of the cities of Huri. In the second half of the century, another Aryan dynasty featuring names such as Sharatna, Paratarna, Shuvushnar, Kartstorma, and Shushtorta had established, and with the help of its many new and great kingship in what was thenceforth called the Kingdom of Matani. So here is the Matani Empire. Here are the Hurrians. These again are Iranian people in the ancient Middle East, and it's important to know you did have Indo-Europeans in the Middle East. It wasn't just Semitic people. So the Matani is one example of an ancient Indo-European, specifically Iranian civilization in the Middle East. There are many other Indo-European civilizations that resided in the land of Shem. There are even migrations that occurred since ancient times. A lot of us tend to think that the Middle East became, widened or became more European due to the Roman invasions and Greek invasions, but no. Indo-Europeans were entering the Middle East far before the Romans and far before the Greeks. So furthermore, we can cover how isolated Middle Easterners descend from ancient Europeans, because many people don't know this. Even isolated Middle Easterners have European ancestry. As I covered before, present-day Levantines are drawn towards Bronze Age Europeans. Iraqi Arabs, Iraqi Kurds, and Assyrians appear to be closer to ancient Iranians. So if you deal with the Armenian people, here's an interesting fact that you find. Armenians were found to have genetic affinity to several other populations, including the Jews, the Druze, and Lebanese Christians, in addition to showing genetic continuity in the Caucasus. We observe that Armenians form a distinctive cluster bound by Europeans, Near Easterners, and the Caucasus populations. More specifically, Armenians are close to Spaniards, Italians, and Romanians from Europe, Lebanese, Jews, Druze, and Cretans from the Near East, and Georgians, Albanians from the Caucasus. Let's see. Yeah, let's see where we begin. All right, so we find that Armenians and other genetic isolates of the Near East, high shared ancestry with ancient European farmers, with ancestry proportions being similar to present-day Europeans, but not to present-day Near Easterners. Again, with ancestry proportions being similar to present-day Europeans, but not present-day Near Easterners. These results suggest that genetic isolates of the Near East, Cretans, an island population, Near Eastern Jews and Christian religious isolates, and Armenians, ethno-linguistic isolates, probably retain the features of an ancient genetic landscape in the Near East that had more affinity to Europe than the present populations do. Our tests show that most of the Near East genetic isolates ancestry that is shared with Europeans can be attributed to expansions after the Neolithic period. And so going further, So going further, starting right here, Armenians adopted a distinctive culture early in their history, resulted in their genetic isolation from their surroundings. Their genetic resemblance today to other genetic isolates in the Near East, but not to most other Near Easterners, suggests that recent admixture has changed the genetic landscape in most populations in the region. Armenians' genetic diversity reveals that the ancient Near East had higher affinity to Neolithic Europe than it does now, and that Bronze Age demographic possesses a major impact on the genetics of populations in the region. So even if we look at isolated Middle Eastern populations, they have more of a genetic ties to Europe. So far, what we are discovering is that modern Middle Easterners are genetically closest to ancient Europeans and ancient Iranians, both being Indo-European speakers, essentially. Biblically speaking, Indo-Europeans descend from Japheth, which again goes to show you that Semites weren't the only people living in the Middle East. As I went over today, actually, this book covers Japheth a little bit. It says, I'm just going to skip down below. It says, thus Japheth primarily became the ancestors of the modern day Indo-European family of nations. And I'm going to just read this right here. It says, next is Madai. Madai is the ancestor of our modern day Iranians. Josephus says that the descendants of Madai were called Medes by the Greeks. Every time the Medes are mentioned in the Old Testament, the word used is the Hebrew word Madai, after the time of Cyrus. The Medes are always, with one exception, mentioned along with the Persians. They became one kingdom with one law, the law of the Medes and the Persians, mentioned in Daniel chapter 6, verse 8, 12, and 15. Later, they were simply called Persians. Since 1935, they have called their country Iran. The Medes also settled India. Members, and still with Armenia, other members of their clan settled along the way, including in Armenia. The sons of Gomer were Ashkenaz and Rephath and Togarmah, Genesis chapter 10, verse 3. Encyclopedia Britannia says that the Armenians traditionally claim to be descendants of Togarmah and Ashkenaz. Ancient Armenia reached into Turkey, and the name Turkey probably comes from Togarmah. Others of them migrated to Germany. Ashkenaz is the Hebrew word for German. And here's the map, just visualizing all this for you. So biblically and historically, there were Indo-European civilizations / descendants of Japheth that resided in the land of Shem, and there were even migrations that occurred since ancient times, both during the Bronze Age and after. So you did have non-Semitic populations living in the Middle East for thousands of years, technically since the Tower of Babel, if you go with the younger. But needless to say, what's interesting about the phenotype of Iranians and Armenians is that they do have that Middle Eastern, that quote unquote Middle Eastern look, specifically to the people south of them. So let's look at Indo-Iranians. So what do Iranians look like? What's the typical Iranian phenotype? Are Iranians European? Well, Iranians typically have like a tan skin tone, as I always say. Their hair is dark and their eyes are dark as well. And when it comes to the Armenians themselves, they also have a tanned to white skin tone with dark hair and dark eyes. And when it comes to Indo-Iranians and Armenians, you know, as I've gone over before, these phenotypes sort of bounce off each other. They're kind of very similar. So the Indo-Iranians and the Armenians and other peoples of the northern part of the Near East are under the classification of Armenoid. This Armenoid phenotype of having like a hooked nose, black hair, dark brown eyes, stuff like that, which is seen among people like ancient Sumerians and Hittites and Cretans and peoples of those nature situated around Armenia and Anatolia and Iran. And again, like I said, this type is seen in the ancient Hittites. And here are examples of ancient Hittites. And of course, as I said before, the Armenoid phenotype, black hair, brown eyes, brunette skin, you know, tan skin, seen among peoples mostly in Armenians, Turks, and Syrians, many Persians like Iranians, you know, Ashkenazim Jews, etc., etc. And here is an example of Hittites to the left and Armenians to the right. And I do believe that there is a resemblance, a very nice resemblance. They have that triangular facial structure, I would say. And I went over how this Armenoid type is basically like a Anatolian, Armenian looking phenotype, typically among ancient Hittites, as I said. And actually, let me read this. It says, the so-called Armenoid type is defined by Hayden under the Eurasic brachycephalous of Anatolian and Armenian, dark hair, tawny white skin, medium stature, very brachycephalic, a prominent aquiline nose with a depressed tip and large wings, very characteristic. Scattered in Anatolia, Armenia, and ancient Hittites were typically members of this race. So what is a aquiline nose? You might be wondering, what is an aquiline nose? So an aquiline nose, also called a Roman nose or hook nose, is a human nose that is prominent bridged, giving it the appearance of being curved or slightly bent. The word aquiline comes from the Latin aquilinus, eagle-like, an allusion to the curved beak of an eagle. So just to show you an example of that. So when they say our Armenoids have a aquiline nose, they're talking about like a curvature of the nose. According to anthropologist Jean Kaskowski, it is mostly frequently found among members of the Oriental race or the Armenoid race. It is also often seen in the Mediterranean race and the Druidic race, where it is known as the Roman nose when found among Italians, the Southern, French, Portuguese, and Spanish. So here to the right is a Armenian man, to the left are Hittites. And this is the aquiline nose, as they say. So the Armenoid phenotype. The Armenoid phenotype is basically white to tan skin, black straight or wavy hair, dark brown eyes, and hooked nose. This is typically the phenotype that people call Semitic. But in reality, this phenotype in ancient times is Indo-European in origin, specifically of the northern Near East, in places such as Iran, Armenia, and Anatolia. Biblically, this would be the descendants of Japheth. This is why, in terms of phenotype, we have to be careful about what we call Semitic phenotype, because in reality, the phenotype we call Semitic is actually just a sub-branch of the Caucasian phenotype. That being said, I do consider this Armenoid phenotype to be Middle Eastern. I will call it a Middle Eastern phenotype, but it's the Near Eastern branch of the Indo-Europeans that settled in the Near East in ancient times. Phenotypically, Middle Easterners to the south look no different than Middle Easterner populations to the north in places like Armenia and Iran, who again are Indo-European people. Like if you were to look at the Arabs, the Arab phenotype is not that different from the Iranian or the Armenian phenotype, in my opinion. Let's look at Indo-Iranians again. These are Indo-Iranians who many people confuse for being Semites. And then here are the Armenians. Again, they sort of share that same phenotype. So genetics seem to prove the commonality between the Indo-European populations north of the Near East, like Iran and Armenia, and the so-called Semitic populations to the south of the Middle East. But at one point, these Indo-European Near Easterners were not in the south of the Middle East because no ancient samples have been found, specifically those carrying haplogroup J. Therefore, they most likely migrated south over time during the early Bronze Age. When did early Bronze Age? When you start to see Indo-European civilizations pop up in the Near East. Reading this study right here, it says, around the time of the Neolithic demographic transition, the genome-wide ancestry of West Asian populations was geographically structured into three groups. Among them, haplogroup J-M304 is found in the Caucasus, Iranian, and Anatolian hunter-gatherers and farmers, but not in the Levantine ones. Again, but not in the Levantine ones. Unfortunately, so far, DNA studies are missing from the Arabian Peninsula and Mesopotamia, where haplogroup J-M304 is frequent nowadays. And again, this kind of connects with what we know about present-day Levantines are drawn more toward Bronze Age Europeans, and that, you know, Iraqi Arabs and Iraqi Kurds and Syrians appear to be closer to ancient Iranians, and how, you know, we found ancestry related to ancient Iranians that basically is the same as today's that is, you know, equals today to all Middle Easterners. So, and also previous studies show that this ancestry was not present in the Levant during the Neolithic period, but appeared in the Bronze Age, where 50% of the local ancestry was replaced by a population carrying ancient Iranian related ancestry. And these populations potentially introduced the Y chromosome haplogroup J1 into the region. And as I said earlier before, we find that Armenians and other genetic isolates in the Middle East and the Near East high shared ancestry with ancient European farmers, with ancestral proportions being similar to present-day Europeans, but not to present-day Near Easterners. So basically just recapping everything that I just said. And when you look at the locations where the descendants of Japheth settled, they are in that northern part of the Near East, with Togarmah and Ashkenaz and Medai and people like that. With all that being said, this leads to the compare and contrast between the two different peoples living in the land of Shem. Because when we put all the information together, it's clear that all Middle Easterners are not the same, that there are different people living in the Middle East. Furthermore, one of these groups truly is Semitic origin, while the other are later comers. So I'm going to switch to my other presentation.
Great job, Ivry. Great job.
Thank you, brother. Thank you. So here is my next one, the one that got deleted, but I managed to bring it all back. All right. So Natufians versus Indo-Iranians. The two peoples of the Middle East. So let's put everything together. Arabians and Bedouins are positioned close to ancient Levantines, while present-day Levantines are drawn towards Bronze Age Europeans, Iraqi Arabs, Iraqi Kurds, and the Syrians appear relatively closer to ancient Iranians. When we substitute Levantine Neolithic with Natufians as sources of ancestry in the Middle East, we found that Arabians could be modeled successfully, whereas none of the present-day Levantines can be modeled as such. Model-based clustering also shows that Arabian populations have subsequently lower Anatolian Neolithic ancestry compared to modern-day Levantines. Arabians are closer to Natufians, whereas modern-day Levantines are closer to Anatolian Neolithic people. So there was definitely a change that occurred. So it says right here, we found an ancestor related to ancient Iranians that is, man, this word always trips me up.
Ubiquitous.
Ubiquitous today in all Middle Easterners. Previous studies showed that this ancestry was not present in the Levant during the Neolithic period, but appeared in the Bronze Age, where 50% of the local ancestry was replaced, but a population carrying ancient Iranian-related ancestry. And it says this population potentially introduced the Y chromosome haplogroup J1 into the region. common in the Natufians, E1B1B, is also frequent in our data set, with most lineages coinciding 8.3 KYA. By modeling contemporary populations using ancient genomes, we identified differences between the Levant and Arabia. The Levant today has higher European/Anatolian related ancestry, while Arabia has higher African and Natufian like ancestry. So definitely was a change that occurred. It has been suggested that population discontinuity occurred between the late Paleocene and early Haliocene in Arabia, and that the peninsula was repopulated by Neolithic farmers from the Fertile Crescent. Our models suggest that Arabians could have derived their ancestry from Natufian-like local hunter-gatherer populations instead of Levantine farmers. As we can see, there are two peoples living in the Middle East: those who descend from Natufians and those who descend from Anatolian, Iranian Europeans. The ethnic groups that descend from the Natufians will likely be your true Semitic types. As I said before, this paper makes an additional inference, since there is archaeological and physical anthropological reason to believe that Natufians were related to modern Semitic-speaking peoples of the Levant. So, the autosomal DNA of Natufians is very distinct, being African and Asiatic Arabian. As I said before, Natufians are a split between Africans and Arabians. They're 61% Arabian, 21% North African, 10% Eurasian, and 6% Omotic. The autosomal DNA of Natufians is very distinct, being African and Asiatic Arabian, whereas the autosomal DNA of Caucasus hunter-gatherers is Anatolian, Iranian, and Caucasian, as I said before. So, we clearly are dealing with two different types of people groups. As stated before, it's strongly suggested that Natufians are the ancestors of Semites and not Caucasus hunter-gatherers. That being said, the Natufian genome has African ancestry. This is interesting because there has always been a notion that ancient Semites were African. As I said before, Christopher Ehret says, after all, the early Semites were just a few Africans arriving to find a lot of other people already in the area. And Greensberg says, hence, it may have been Africa that gave birth to languages spoken by the authors of the Old and New Testaments and the Quran, the moral pillars of Western civilization. Of course, Caucasus hunter-gatherers have zero African DNA, and to be Semitic is to have African DNA. I believe extra biblical sources, such as the Book of Jubilees, even confirms this fact. In the Book of Jubilees, Eber, the father of the Hebrew people, married Azurad, who was the daughter of Nimrod. You can find this in Jubilees chapter 8. And it reads, Eber, and he took unto himself a wife, and her name was Azurad, the daughter of Nimrod. She bare him a son, and he called his name Peleg. So the Book of Jubilees mentions the name Nimrod, the Greek form of Nimrod, only as being the father of Azurad, the wife of Eber and the mother of Peleg, mentioned in chapter 8, verse 7. This account would thus make Nimrod an ancestor of Abraham and hence all Hebrews. And if you go to Genesis chapter 10, verse 8, it reads, Cush begot Nimrod, and he became a mighty one on the earth. And Nimrod, the son of Cush, and therefore the great-grandson of Noah. So if you look at the genealogy, and if you take Jubilees to be truth, then you do have African ancestry entering the Hebrews, entering ancient Semitic populations, including Abraham. So with that being said, Caucasus hunter-gatherers seem to hardly represent the ancestors of Semitic people. Natufians seem to be the best representation of early Semitic people's ancestors. But now let's turn our attention back to Y-DNA haplogroups. Haplogroup E versus J. Afro-Asiatics, which includes Semitic, has always been known to be haplogroup E. There really is no getting around this. The Proto-Afro-Asiatic group carrying the E-P2 mutation may have appeared at this point in time and subsequently gave rise to the different major haplogroups, major population groups, including current speakers of the Afro-Asiatic languages and the pastoralist populations. Here's another paper. Most of the Afro-Asiatic speakers shared the lineage defined by YAP descendant called PN2/215/M35. Here's another paper. Haplogroup E1B1B, formerly known as E3B, represents the last major direct migration from Africa to Europe. E1B1B lineages are closely linked to the diffusion of Afro-Asiatic languages. Perfect map illustrating Afro-Asiatic languages and haplogroup E, and they perfectly overlap each other. Now, some people might say, what about E1B1A, E-M2, Niger-Congo/Bantu people? They don't speak Afro-Asiatic languages, yet they have haplogroup E. Well, at one time, it is believed that E-M2 people did speak an Afro-Asiatic language related to Lasio-Berber and even Semitic. Let's get into that. So here's E-M2. As I said before, some people might say, well, if E is Afro-Asiatic, how come these guys don't speak Afro-Asiatic? I'm about to show you that they may have at one point. So you can read this book called Semitic Languages, Outline of the Comparative Grammar by E. Lipsky. He says the Lasio-Berbers continued instead to occupy the original language area of the speakers of Afro-Asiatic. Their African origins may even confirm a relationship of Afro-Asiatic with Bantu languages, which form the central group of the large Niger-Congo family, and whose language homeland probably lies in the Nigeria, Cameroon region. And connecting Lasio-Berber to Semitic, this goes into it right here. It says, thus Lasio-Berber is certainly closer to the Semitic branch than Egyptian or Cushitic, while Chadic languages. Very characteristic of Lasio-Berber of the Semitic are the preserved features of the argative language type. These two branches of Afro-Asiatic are thus closely related to each other, but this relationship can best be explained by the general frame of the whole language family. So he puts Semitic and Berber very close to each other. And I'll let Yeshua read some of this.
All right. Semitic Languages Outline of a Comparative Grammar by E. Lipinski. It says separation is a variable in the sense that parts of an original language community will tend to diverge faster if they become completely separated, as, say, Semitic and the Lipko-Berber around e.g. 1000 BC. The similarities in language between peoples living so far away from each other are due not to cultural contact and borrowing, but to a common linguistic tradition. Proto-Semitic maintained for a certain time closer language contacts with Lipko-Berber and with Cushitic.
And so bringing us back to what he said about Bantu and Niger-Congo, if he is saying that Lasio-Berber is close to Proto-Semitic, then let's reread this again. The Lasio-Berbers continued instead to occupy the original language area of the area of the Afro-Asiatic. Their African origins may even be confirmed by a relationship of Afro-Asiatic with Bantu languages, which form the central group of the larger Niger-Congo family and whose homeland probably lies in the Nigeria, Cameroon area. So it is likely that Bantu and Niger-Congo people did speak a type of Afro-Asiatic language that has since been lost, or probably mixed. Now, some people might say, what about E-V13? Greeks don't speak Afro-Asiatic languages, yet they have haplogroup E. Well, the Greek language and script has been heavily influenced by Afro-Asiatic Semitic people, such as the Phoenicians. Here is the distribution of EV13. On the European continent, it has the highest contribution at Kolvos, over 45%, Albania and Montenegro, both 27%, Bulgaria at 23%, Macedonia and Greece, both 21%, Cyprus at 20%, Sicily at 20%, Southern Italy at 18.5%, Serbia at 18%, and Romania at 15%. The classical antiquity brought new waves of colonization across the Mediterranean. The first colonialists were Phoenicians, who came from present-day Lebanon and the Tartarus province of Syria. The Phoenicians possessed a variety of paternal lineages reflecting the complex ancient history of the Middle East. One of them was E-M34, which makes up about 15% of modern Lebanese by DNA, but was probably higher before the Greek, Roman, Arabic, Byzantine, medieval Crusader, and Ottoman occupations altered the local gene pool. E-M34 is the main Middle Eastern variety of B and is thought to have arrived with Proto-Semitic people in late Copper to early Bronze Age. The Venetians would have spread E-M34 to Cyprus, Matali, Sicily, Sardinia, Albania, and southern Iberia. The ancient Greeks contributed to the rediffusion of more E-M34 and E-V13 around places such as Cyprus, Sicily, southern Italy, Liguria, Provence, eastern Spain, and basically all part of the classical ancient Greek world. The Etruscans, who may have come from Western Anatolia, could have brought E-M34 to central Italy, which would then have been assimilated by Romans. So basically, here's the spread of Afro-Asiatic and Semitic languages from the Levant into Greece, which does perfectly overlap with haplogroup E going from the Levant into the Balkans, into Greece. It is apparent that haplogroup E has an Afro-Asiatic connection in high degree in all lands where this Y chromosome and language is found. As they always show, Afro-Asiatic and haplogroup E perfectly overlap each other. No matter how anyone tries to twist it or change it, it fits perfectly. And again, even in the Middle East, you can find haplogroup E among indigenous Semitic populations that descend from the Natufians, the fathers of Proto-Semitic. As I said before, Arabians and Bedouins are positioned closely to ancient Levantines. And of course, they descend from the Natufians, as I said over and over again. Here is the samples from this same study that show a lot of Yemeni and Saudi lineages with E markers. And again, here is just a visual representation of the high concentration of E-M123 and E-M34 in places like Yemen. They have it up to like 50%. Here's a closer image of that. And so, with all that being said, it's with all that being said, it's a completely different story concerning haplogroup J. A large part of J is seen among non-Semitic speakers among Indo-European populations. If you look at, for instance, haplogroup J2, it perfectly overlaps with Indo-European languages. As a matter of fact, the only branch of haplogroup J that's considered Semitic is J-P58. Any other branch of J isn't really considered Semitic. J-P58 was the only major sub-branch of haplogroup J to go south into the Middle East. So it reads up here, Y chromosome haplogroup J-M304 represents the major male lineage of West Asia today. Around the time of the Neolithic demographic transition, this genome-wide ancestry of West Asian populations was geographically concentrated into three groups. Among them, haplogroup J-M304 is found in the Caucasus, Iranian, and Anatolian hunter-gatherers and farmers, but not in the Levantine ones. Unfortunately, so far, DNA studies are missing from the Arabian Peninsula, the Mesopotamia, where haplogroup J-M304 is frequent nowadays. But it wasn't there in ancient times, basically. So, further reading, it says, Y chromosome haplogroup J1-M267 evolved in the northern parts of West Asia around the LGM. A limited number of founders migrated south to the Arabian Peninsula, the southern Levant, and southern Mesopotamia, where the J1A1A1-P58 branch evolved in the early Heliocene. Haplogroup J1-M267 expanded during the Chalcolithic, the Bronze Age, and the Iron Age, coinciding with the spread of Afro-Asiatic languages combined with the diffusion of arid pastoralism in the desert regions of West Asia. So this right here, another paper, the emergence of Y chromosome haplogroup J1E among Arabic-speaking populations. It reads, moreover, the previously described J1 chromosomes frequently found in the Caucasus and Eastern Anatolia were ancestral to J1E and displaced by expansion time of 9,000 years. For J1E, the Zagros and Tartarus mountain region displays the highest haplotype diversity, although the J1E frequency increased towards the peripheral Arabian Peninsula. And again, this is another study right here, a new one dealing with, I'm not going to read it actually because to give away my future presentation, but here's another study. Haplogroup J-P58 is frequent in the Arabian Peninsula with proposed origins in the Zagros and Tartarus mountain region. And so the main, actually it's going to say right here, J1-P58 is by far the most widespread subclade of J1. It is a typical Semitic haplogroup. Remember, it is a typical Semitic haplogroup making up most of the population of the Arabian Peninsula, where it accounts for approximately 40 to 75% of males. So J1-P58 is the haplogroup that most people associate with Semites, but here's the problem. As stated before, out of all the branches of haplogroup J, only one is considered Semitic, which is J-P58. All other branches of J, for the most part, are not considered Afro-Asiatic or Semitic in origin. This includes the rest of haplogroup J1, other than J-P58, and all of haplogroup J2. So here is J-P58 And here are all the other branches of J that aren't considered Semitic. Only JP58 from J1 is considered Semitic. Only this one lineage that went into Arabia. Now here is, again, JP58, other branches of J1, and here's J2 with its branches. And only JP58, as I said again, is considered to be quote unquote Semitic, but really it's just one branch of J that went into the Middle East and happened to dominate the region. This one branch. Here's another different branch, which is seen in Macedonian Greeks and Etruscans in Europe. And here are other branches of another J, his J2, seen in people like Romans and stuff. So with that being said, this is in stark contrast to haplogroup E, where most of its branches are Afro-Asiatic in origin, including Proto-Semitic, whereas only one branch of haplogroup J, JP58, is seen as Semitic, while all other branches of haplogroup J1 and J2 are not seen in Afro-Asiatic or Semitic in origin. This, of course, has led many to believe that J as a whole is not Semitic in origin. And it's not just me saying this. This is an interesting paper that goes into this. Haplogroup J1 is definitely not Semitic in origin. The blue bar makes J1-FGC11, which is a unique lineage among Arabs. On the other hand, the other lineages would seen among Europeans, Caucasian Turks, rather than Arabs. This means J1 isn't of Semitic origin. J-M267, basically in Turkey, Armenia, and Russia, and then it kind of goes outwards, some going to Arabia, and most of the branches going into Europe in the Eurasia. You see, there's more diversity of J branches. Here are the different branches, the numbers. There's more diversity of J branches in Eurasia, and really only one branch of J in the Middle East. So just as I stated earlier, only one branch of J is seen as Semitic, whereas all the other branches of J are found among European, Caucasian, and Turks. Just visually showing you this again. So continuing the study, it says, it is also known that the mostly seen haplogroups and Afro-Asiatic speakers in the lineages of E1b, such as EV12, EV32, and M81. E1b is one of the most common haplogroups in Semitic people in the Levant and Mesopotamia. In the meantime, E-V12 seems to be a part of a Nile basin in Arabia, and E-M81 is related to Northwest Africa. In Arab genealogical tradition, the Adians are Arab-derized Arabs, whereas Quatanites tribes are thought to be pure Arabs, the local people of Arabia. Today, in genetic projects, we see that most of the people of Quatani tribes are usually related to the lineages of E1b, whereas Adonites, again, Arab-derized Arabs, are mostly related to J1. In this presentation, I covered the descendants of Joktan, the son of Eber. Arabians call him Quaktan. But in our previous discussion, we know that he settled the Red Sea region. Specifically, his descendants settled in Yemen and even crossed into the Horn of Africa. We still see large amounts of haplogroup E in Yemen that derive from the Natufians. Furthermore, I find it interesting that Joktan or Quaktan in Arabian tradition is considered to be the true or pure Arabians, because the ancestors of Arabians are Natufians. And Natufians themselves are the ancestors of Semitic people. If you want to read about Joktan's descendants and where he settled, It's mentioned in Genesis chapter 10, verse 24 through 31. I'm going to skip down to the yellow. It says, and their dwelling place was from Mesha as you go towards Sephar, the mountains of the east. And Mesha is in the Levant. I covered this in the past. And Sephar is in Yemen. So basically, it's the western part of Arabia. And what's interesting about this is that when it comes to the spread of Semitic languages, they do spread from the Levant down the Western Arabia into the Horn of Africa. Same thing with haplogroup E. If it originated in the Levant, it would have spread from the Levant into down Western Arabia into the Horn of Africa. So you kind of do see an interesting overlap. And again, various Yemeni people have high amounts of haplogroup E, up to like 50%. And you do see a high concentration of haplogroup E along the Western Arabian coast. And again, Natufians are 61% Arabian. And Arabians and Bedouins are closest to ancient Levantines. And this paper kind of shows you that as well. Yemeni and Saudi lineages with E markers. These will be your Quachtenites. Ancient Arabians who descend from Natufians, the ancestors Semites, would have had haplogroup E, would have carried haplogroup E. But back to the article. So it says the main source of Afro-Asiatic languages are the lineages of E1B1, such as M2, E1B1A, V12, V32, U174, V22, which spread the Levant during the early period of ancient Egypt and later towards Mesopotamia in the east. And I'll let Yeshua take on this one.
All right. Let me just move my logo for a minute so I can see the entire paragraph. All right, so it reads, haplogroup J1 is definitely not Semitic in origin. Semitic languages such as Hebrew, Arabic, and Amharic are categorized under the Afro-Asiatic language family. This means that Arabic and the Hebrew languages derive from the same language with Berber, Chadic, Cushitic, Egyptian, Amharic, and Omotic languages of Afro-Asiatic language family in North Africa. Today, we see that the most of Afro-Asiatic people are of E1B1B haplogroup, especially the lineages of V12, V32, and M81. And we see a great variety of E1B lineages among both Semitic and Afro-Asiatic people, whereas only FGC11 lineage of J1 is present among Afro-Asiatic Semitic people. And it is also impossible to see J1 haplogroup among several Afro-Asiatic people, such as the Berberis, etc. According to the theory, Afro-Asiatic languages spread to Asia via E1B haplogroup, not J1 haplogroup. It is historically known that a ruling elite class of Afro-Asiatic peoples, Akkadians, Assyrians, etc., also invaded the north of Mesopotamia and brought their Afro-Asiatic languages to the central and northern parts of Mesopotamia during the period of the Akkadians and Babylonians. Elite dominance model of E1B1 might be supposed for Akkadians, Assyrians, and Babylonians. In this sense, it might be theorized that Sumerians was the main language of the ancient Mesopotamians before Afro-Asiatic E1B overwhelmed Mesopotamia. Elite dominance model.
I think we need an explosion for that one.
Man, you shut the internet out. Shut the internet down with that one.
Yeah, so going further, of course, this isn't the first time that we hear that Semitic groups such as Akkadians would have brought haplogroup E into the Levant and from the Levant into Mesopotamia. Ancient DNA samples and charts seems to imply this as well. As I always show you this chart, when you look at it and see how it's spreading out from the Levant into Mesopotamia, it really does seem to indicate what all these linguists are saying about Akkadians coming from the Levant to Mesopotamia. And of course, the DNA seems to follow up on that. To this day, we can find haplogroup E among modern Mesopotamian populations. For instance, B1C1A tends to be up to 20% to 30% among Chaldean Assyrians and much less among the other Assyrians. And when it comes to the Catholic, the Chaldean Church, they have about 23.8%. It says where the Chaldean Catholic Y-DNA profile is distinguished in its frequency of E1B1B1C1/A, whether E1B1B1C1/A in the Chaldean Church is diverse, one cannot tell based on the data gathered at 23andMe. Hopefully some will test at FTDNA. But basically, they are finding that there are a lot of samples of E among the Catholic, or not Catholic, but the Chaldean Catholic peoples. But some of you might be asking, why does haplogroup J carriers speak Semitic today? The simple answer is they adopted it. When ancient haplogroup J carrying males came into the Middle East, they adopted the language of Semitic from the E carriers. There are many papers that say this. For instance, this paper, it says, it can be postulated that select M35 carriers, speakers from Africa of a stage of ancestral Semitic, pre-Proto-Semitic, entered the Near East, where indigenous groups adopted it, and via ongoing language shift and population growth eventually became numerously greater than the original speakers of the ancestor. So basically saying that M35 or E-M35 lineages first spoke Semitic, then another people adopted it and they just became more numerous, basically. That basically says the same thing. It says the presence of Semitic in the Near East might be explained as follows. Pre-Proto-Semitic speakers would have emerged into Syrio-Palestine before the Neolithic, being taken by their M35 bearers, specifically M35/78, and adopted by populations bearing M89 lineages. So F-M89 includes all haplogroups that descend from CF, which is likely Japheth. So many lineages that descend from F-M89, such as J, is not a Afro-Asiatic or Semitic speaker in origin, and they adopted the language. So when it says would have migrated, early pre-Proto-Semitic speakers would have migrated into Syrio-Palestine before the Neolithic, being taken by M35 bearers and adopted by populations bearing M89 lineages, that will include J. Let's learn a little bit about F. So F, also known as F-M89, and previously as haplogroup FT, is very common Y chromosome haplogroup. The clade and its subclades constitutes over 90% of paternal lineages outside of Africa. And as you can see, you have F, and from F will come like IJ, and then you have J. And we talked about I earlier today. Here's a closer map showing that all these lineages come from F. It says the vast majority of individual males with F-M89 fall into its distinct descendant haplogroup GHIJK. Haplogroup GHIJK branches subsequently into two distinct descendants, G and HIJK. HIJK in turn split into H and IJK. The descendants of the haplogroup IJK includes the clades I, J, K, and ultimately made several major haplogroups descended from haplogroup K, namely haplogroups M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, L, and T. And here's just basically showing you the ethnic groups who are related to these different haplogroups. I'll let that stay on the page for a few seconds. All right. So as I stated before, haplogroup J adopted Semitic languages from haplogroup E. Yeah, I'll take this one. So when you look at this this specific article, it says, is J1-P58 the main Arabic paternal lineage? It says, looking at the map of J1P58, which we were just talking about, it is easy to assume that JP58 is a marker of Arabic ancestry because it reaches its maximum frequency in and around the Arabian Peninsula. That would be an oversimplification. It is important to make a clear distinction between people who speak Arabic and those who are genetically Arabic. Though these are two completely different things. For comparison, people who speak languages descended from Latin, French, Spanish, Portuguese, Italian, Romanian are not necessarily descendants from the ancient Romans of Lutium. Even those who do may not have more than a tiny fraction of their genome, which was inherited from actual Roman ancestors. This is why most Romance languages today cannot be considered as genetically Roman. The most present-day Arabic speakers outside of the Arabian Peninsula are likewise only very partially or not all Arabic genetically. In the north half of the Middle East, most of the people who call themselves Arabs of today are in fact mainly descendants of other historic peoples such as the Phoenicians, the Assyrians, the Babylonians, or even the Hurrians. Very interesting group to study. Most of these peoples are predominantly J2 with many minor haplogroups such as E1B1B, G, J1, L, Q, R1A, R1B, and T. Other subclades of J1 cannot be considered to be the paternal descendants of the first Arabic speakers. These other J1 lineages were Arabicized alongside other haplogroups like J2 and Q1b. So even they know that J1 likely isn't the origin of these Arabic peoples. Furthermore, it says, like J1-P58, E-M34, it also shared with their Semitic cousins, the Jews. Haplogroup E1B1B is considered the prime candidate for the origin and dispersal of Afro-Asiatic languages across North and Eastern Africa and Southwest Asia. The Semitic languages appear to have originated within a subclade of the M34 branch of E1B1B. So even they know that E is the likely origin of this Semitic people and that J adopted it. So all of this makes sense. After all, Proto-Semitic originated in the Levant. There are 0 samples of J in the Neolithic era of the Levant. Haplogroup E dominated the Levant and likely spread Afro-Asiatic languages, including Semitic. The ancestors of Semites would be the Natufians, who had 0 haplogroup J. Semitic languages would have expanded from the Levant in the early Bronze Age with haplogroup E, where haplogroup J was just now entering the Levant during the early Bronze Age, where E was already there. Therefore, haplogroup J spoke a different language prior to entering the Levant in the Bronze Age. The language of haplogroup J likely being a non-Semitic language because Semitic speakers didn't exist in the Caucasus where haplogroup J came from. As I always point out this study, Natufians are the best example for the origins of Semites. And Natufians and Levantine farmers had haplogroup E. And haplogroup J is absent in all Natopian and Neolithic Levantine samples. And E dominated the Levant, where J was only entering the Levant in the Bronze Age.
He's on fire!
And J was not seen in the Levant, Arabia, or Mesopotamia in the past. It only entered it recently. Again, while haplogroup J was just now entering the Levant in the Bronze Age, haplogroup E was already in the Levant and associated with Afro-Asiatic speakers such as Semitic. Haplogroup E, by the way, expanded from the Levant in the Bronze Age. This makes haplogroup E the best candidate for Proto-Semitic. As the latest linguist paper says, we estimate Semitic had an early Bronze Age origin in the Levant, followed by the expansion of Akkadian into Mesopotamia. E-M34 is the main Middle Eastern variety of E1B1B and is thought to have arrived with Proto-Semitic people in the late Copper to early Bronze Age.
He's on fire!
With all that being said, I conclude that haplogroup J is not Afro-Asiatic or Semitic in origin. Haplogroup J adopted Semitic languages from haplogroup E carriers. Haplogroup E is Proto-Semitic and Afro-Asiatic in origin. So the biblical period. With all that being said, we are dealing with the ancient ancestors of the Hebrews of Israel. Now let's harmonize what we learned with the biblical time period, the patriarchs and matriarchs. What ancient ethnic groups would best represent Abraham's ancestors? Genetically, what would Abraham and Isaac be? The final piece of information that I'm about to present can be used for an old or young earth. Let's begin. From Shem to Israel. And this will be my last piece of the presentation, and then I'll be done. It's only a few slides.
Let me work! Please let me work! Get that water. He about to get this work. He about to get this work. Hold up. Hold up. He gonna get this work. He gonna get this work, nigga. Hold up. He gonna get this work. He gonna get this work, nigga. I killed you. Hold up. He gonna get this work. Hold up. Hold up. You niggas gonna get this work, you hear me? Me. He ain't even get the second verse, but he gonna get this work. Hold up, man.
Yeah, they about to get this work hard. All right, so from Shem, I'll get rid of that. All right, from Shem to Israel, according to the scriptures, from the male lineage, the Hebrews of Israel descend from Shem. The Israelites themselves will be a Semitic people. Semitic is part of the Afro-Asiatic family. Went over this before. Here is the lineage according to their own scriptures. Here is the academic understanding of the language group. Here is the language, specific the language group of the Hebrews. And we know that the Israelites are Semitic people, the Hebrews, Semitic people. So,
He's on fire!
why looking at paternal lineage is important. From the paternal lineage, we can determine who the Hebrews would be. We can use haplogroups to do this. This almost seems very similar to it. Oh, yeah, it's new. And just reiterating, looking at the paternal haplogroups, the father. That being said, where did Shem settle? I believe Shem would have settled in the Levant. The descendants of Shem would have built ancient cities such as Jerusalem. Jerusalem was ruled by the king of Salem or Melchizedek. I believe the culture and the god of Shem was passed down from Shem to Eber and Melchizedek. So I believe Shem was here in the Levant. And it says in Genesis chapter 9, and he said, blessed be the Lord God of Shem. Genesis chapter 10, and the children were born unto Shem, the father of all the children of Eber. And it says in Genesis 14, Melchizedek, king of Salem, the priest of the Most High God, of God Most High. You see this passing down of this culture, this understanding of the Most High. And what's interesting about this is that some people do believe that Melchizedek is Shem. An ancient tradition tells us that Melchizedek was actually one and the same as Shem, the son of Noah, and that Shalem or Salam or Shalom was none other than the very ancient place that Abraham would eventually rename Ream. So Shalem is the first half, Ream plus Shalom is Jerusalem. And the city of Jerusalem goes back to the Neolithic period, or to the Chalcolithic Neolithic period. It's about 6,000 years old. And according to the book of Jubilees, Eber, the father of the Hebrew race, married Azurad, the daughter of Nimrod, who was the son of Cush, the son of Ham, as I said before. And this is important because when we look at the DNA of, actually, I'll say right here, we actually could validate this ancient admixture between Neolithic Africans and Neolithic Arabians, Asiatic populations in the Levant, which ultimately could validate the story of African and Asiatic populations mixing with one another. Furthermore, if Azurad was African, she likely could have been mtDNA-L, which is found in Syria and among African/Jewish people. Remember, the Natufians are basically split between Africans and Asiatics. And I'll let Yeshub take on this one.
All right. First Farmers, The Origins of Agricultural Societies by Peter Bellwood. Mid-Holocene desiccation of the Sahara, which with retractions of the summer monsoon finally led to the virtual abandonment of Natopian and other oasis settlements about 4000 BC. And this might have led to a kind of refuge movement into the Nile Valley, where Saharan people would have met and mixed with the descendants of the Southwest Asian Neolithic population responsible for the introduction of the Southwest Asian agricultural tradition into the Nile Valley about 1500 years earlier. The resulting amalgam was later to develop into one of the most remarkable civilizations of the ancient world, a true synthesis of the Oriental and the African. Within the Egyptian Neolithic lifestyle are found a number of specific cultural items of presumed Palestinian origin. Even though no precise source can be pinpointed, such items include side-notched and tanged bifacially flaked arrowheads occurring in the PPNA and the pre-pottery Neolithic B in Levant, as well as in the Nile Valley.
So this right here does show that there was ancient Oriental and African populations that mixing with one another, which sort of makes me think of the Eber and Azurad story, where here it says one language family is clearly linked to the spread of farming from the Near East. The Afro-Asiatic family includes ancient Egyptian and other languages that appear in early written records, such as Akkadian and in Mesopotamia. There is a genetic hint of arrivals from Africa. The African mtDNA L2A1 has been found at the farming settlement of Tel Halel in Syria at the pre-pottery level. Y-DNA E1B1B M35 across both the northern and southern coast of the Mediterranean is a clue that it was the male partner of L2A. Then the subclade of E1B1B1 helps to spread farming from around the Mediterranean. And so we find a L2A sample in pre-pottery Neolithic Syria, Tel Halel, Syria. And this sample had ancient Levantine DNA as well. And L2A1B is defined, L2A1B is also common in places like North Africa and Egypt and the southeastern Africa, and it may be associated with a marker for the Bantu expansion. But also L2A1C1 has a North African origin, and it's observed in Tunisian, Sephardic, Ashkenazi Jews, Hebrews, Moroccans, Egyptians, Nubians, and Yemenis. And this paper goes into, it says all Ethiopian L2 lineages can be seen as derived from the two subclades L2A1 and L2B. And about 26 out of 33% of African American women have L2A. Furthermore, what's interesting about this is that it's seen in Jews. This paper goes into that. It says L2A is the most complex subclade within L2A, and it harbors lineages from all African regions, as well as lineages from other continents, including non-African branches, such as L2A112A, connected to the Ashkenazi Jewish diaspora. L2A1 has clearly a West/Central African origin and distribution, with many subclades suggesting a recent Bantu migration southward, and is hardly present in Eastern Africa. L2A11 displays a similar pattern in sub-Saharan Africa, but with a particularly of a sub-branch present in Ashkenazi Jews, L2A1112A. The subclade L2A1 plus 143 shows several basal Eastern African lineages, together with Near Eastern and Arabian lineages that indicate a migration in the early Paleocene.
He's on fire!
This paper goes into it as well. Haplogroup L2A is widespread within Africa. Both of them could have assigned to the L2A112A clade and located on the same branch with the Ashkenazi Jewish haplotype.
He's on fire!
L2A1 haplotypes are observed in Germany, Romania, France, Russia, and Poland. As J2A haplotypes were reported in Ashkenazi Jewish populations, the samples representing haplogroup L2A1112A might be further evidence of the occurrence of Ashkenazi Jewish mitochondrial or mtDNAs and Polish mtDNA gene.
He's on fire!
So there definitely would be an ancient African element among Proto-Semitic populations. To be Semitic is to be African, as I always say. Shem and his descendants, specifically from the lineage of Eber, would be the Natufians. The Natufians are best believed to be the ancestors of Semites. The haplogroup of Natufians is Y-DNA chromosome E. Semites are believed to have expanded from the Levant, the homeland of the Natufians. Furthermore, if Semites descend from Natufians, then they would also have haplogroup E. And as I showed this paper over and over again, Semites are linked to Natufians. Natufians have haplogroup E, and Proto-Semitic peoples would have had haplogroup E as well. And Afro-Asiatic, or should I say Semitic, expanded from the Levant. Just briefly showing you all the papers that are basically telling you this. Now, according to the scriptures, Abraham came from Ur. There is a city of Ur in the northern Levant built by Natufians. This is literally the Ur that Abraham came from based on previous information mentioned. This Ur even culturally connects to Natufians with 75% of haplogroup E. Scripture says that in Genesis chapter 11, verse 27 through 32, it says, "This is the genealogy of Terah. Terah begot Abraham, Nahor, and Haran. Haran begot Lot. And Haran died before his father Terah in the land of his nativity in Ur of the Chaldees. And Terah took his son Abraham and his grandson Lot, and son of Haran, and his daughter-in-law Sarah, his son Abraham's wife. And they went out with them from Ur of the Chaldeans to go to the land of Canaan. And they came to Haran and dwelt there. So the days of Terah were 205 years, and Terah died in Haran." So according to some Jewish and Muslim sources, Arupha is Ur-Chaldistan, the hometown of Abraham and grandfather of Jacob, whom God named Israel. This is in the part of the northern Levant. It says, Ur is one of the truly ancient cities of the world. This city began circa 9000 BCE as a pre-pottery Neolithic site located near Abraham's pools. It was part of the network of first settlements spanning West Asia where agriculture began. And the pre-pottery, by the way, is linked to Mesolithic Natufians. As you can see, they go all the way from the Negev up into Syria, where Abraham's ancestors could have settled. Here's a close representation of that. And it says, Arufa man resembles both carvings at nearby Goloshpitu and statues found at An Gazelle. Now, what's interesting about that is that the Y-DNA haplogroup E1B1B1B12 has been found at 75% of the An Gazelle population, along with 60% of pre-pottery Neolithic B populations, and in most Natufians. So you do see a genetic link as well. And so, lastly, two of these villages would be the nucleus for the major cities of Ur and Haran. Both Ur of Syria and Ur of Haran, and the Ur of Syria is a better chance of being the Ur Abraham came from because it's closer to Haran and it was a major ancient city. Because of this, it's likely Abraham had haplogroup E, because E is found among modern Mesopotamian populations and other Middle Easterners. Furthermore, many Jews, such as Samaritans, who claim the descent from Levi, have haplogroup E. Modern, Chaldean, Assyrian type of E, various Yemeni and Saudi Arabian lineages have E. And when it comes to the Jews, of the priestly Kohan lineage from the tribe of Levi, they say the biggest and most important Samaritan family, the Kohanim family tradition, tribe of Levi, was found to belong to haplogroup E. This article predates the change of the clarification of haplogroup E3b1-M78 to E3b1-M78, and the further subdivision of E3b1A-M78 into 6 subclades based on the research at Cranium. So, Kohanim don't just have J, they also have E. Here's a map that shows that here are the studies. You find about 100% of these Samaritan Levites with E. And you also find a good percentage of Arabs with E as well. Like you have 62% of Arabs in Egypt with E1B1B. You actually have a lot. And in Palestine, you have like 31%. And in the Jordan of the Dead Sea, you have 31%. So you definitely have Arabs as well with high percentages of E. And as you can see over here, very low percentages of J. Samaritan Levites have 0% of J. Arabs in Egypt have like 31% of J versus 32% of E. So, and here are the references, by the way. So genetically, I would say Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob would have haplogroup E because Proto-Semites descend from Natufians. They then would be a bit African. This can be based on Eber and Azuret's story as well. Ultimately, they would genetically, they are genetically typical of an ancient Afro-Asiatic people. Phenotypically, the ancient ancestors of the Hebrews of Israel will be dark-skinned. First of all, according to ancient writers, Shem and his descendants were always seen as dark-skinned peoples. I've read this plenty of times. I'll just skim through it. But Hebrew, Muslim, and Christian writers say Shem is dark-skinned. Now, I feel like I don't have to keep saying this. Furthermore, if Semites such as the ancestors of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob descend from Natufians, the Natufians themselves have a very distinct phenotype based on the remains we found. Furthermore, their autosomal DNA gives us clues to how they would have looked. And we know that they had a sub-Saharan African element within them, and so that they would look a bit African. and that they are related to Neolithic Arabians, North Africans, West Asians, and Omotic people. And we went over how if you basically blend these groups together, it will look like a dark-skinned group of people, dark eyes, dark hair. The closest relatives to Abraham, and unironically, the closest descendants to the Natufians would be the Arabians and the Bedouins. Therefore, Abraham could have also looked like those groups who will be connected to the lineage of Joktan, who will be Abraham's distant cousins. Arabians and Bedouins are closest to ancient Levantines. And it says right here, the people of Dhofar are of the people of Joktan or Quaktan, the sons of Joktan mentioned in Genesis. They are of Hamitic, or rather African, rather than Arab types. And here is a chief of Dhofar. This is what he looks like. And here are different Sabaean statues right next to Ethiopians. And if you ask me, Sabaeans look very oddly similar to Ethiopians. Furthermore, we know Abraham could have come from the region of Ur, and Ur was, built by Natufians. And interestingly enough, the surrounding area of Ur was inhabited by dark-skinned Semitic populations and Abraham could have looked like these people. We know that, it was written by ancient writers that the white Syrians whom Strabo places in this region must be Hittites. Indeed, they are especially contrasted with the black Syrians who are said to live east of Armanus, consequently be Arameans. So here is the Armanus Mountains, and these are this is to the east of the Armanus Mountains, which will include Parat Aram mentioned in scripture. And it says that the Chub Arabs, the best present predecessors of the more southern parts of Babylonia, are nearly black, and that the black Syrians of whom Strabo speaks seems intended to represent the Babylonians. And this book goes into the separation of different types of Syrians, the Syrians, the ancient name of the Syrians inhabiting Cappadocia, by which they are distinguished from the more southern Syrians who were of a darker complexion. And so here is a mural of a Aramean people going up against the Assyrians. You can find this by the king of Tiglath the third, who's attacking these Arameans. You can find this at the Levant Museum. He's on fire! And this fresco does depict very dark-skinned Aramean or Syrian peoples with very interesting hairstyles. And here is a Bedouin head from Syria, a reddish brown. You can find this at the Global Museum, the Global Egyptian Museum.org. These are these Bedouin Syrians. So these are more examples of how Abraham could have looked. And what's interesting is that when you look at these Bedouin Syrians made by Egyptians, by the way, during the New Kingdom, they do sort of resemble these Arameans. I mean, the hairstyles, this type of braided, dreaded hairstyle with this, I guess, this cap on their head, or I don't know what you call this, a headband. They have, and over here they have a similar type of headband and similar type of braided hair. So it's very interesting. Mesopotamia was known to have been inhabited by dark-skinned Semites as well. Murals from Mari in Syria and remains from Kish is evidence of this. And Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob could have also looked like these Semites. Kish was an ancient civilization, a Semitic civilization of Eastern Semitic speakers. And I've gone over this paper here that says that Proto-Semites could have looked like the Gala people of Somaliland in the Kenya colony, and that the Kish remains kind of have this phenotype. And we find Kish remains, and that they describe the phenotype as being Euro-African. And the Euro-African phenotype is basically dark hair, dark-eyed, dark-skinned, a broad nose, and a prominent jaw. And that the Euro-African race is actually connected to the Mediterranean race, and that this is like a Negroid type. It says the Mediterranean race was the first defined by Sergi, who also called it Euro-African. The Mediterranean race originated in Africa and is closely related to the Negro, both being long-skulled peoples descended from a common stock, the Euro-African.
He's on fire!
So here is Mari. Mari was an ancient Semitic city in modern-day Syria, and here is the depictions of the people of Mari. Here's an image. They are a brown-skinned people with dark hair. Here's another fresco of people of Mari, Semites, dark-skinned, dark-haired.
He's on fire!
Everything together, I would say that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob would have been dark-skinned looking people with black, thick hair and dark eyes. That would be the best way I would describe them. Putting everything together, I would say Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob would kind of look like this. All right, so genetically speaking, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob would have had haplogroup E autosomally. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob would have had some African ancestry. Everything we just discussed is literally the complete opposite of haplogroup J. There is very little reason to believe that haplogroup J is Semitic in origin. Very little reason. So now it's time for the Q&A. We finally got there. Now it's time for the Q&A. Keep your questions focused on the topic of the presentation. And yeah.
He's on fire!
All right, time for questions. If anybody got any questions, now it's time to place your questions in the comment section. We'll make it about the topic. Come on. Y'all work with me now. Make it about what he brought out and presented earlier. And I also put the link in there if anybody wants to join and, pose a question to the brother Ivory. All right, I'm strolling up, seeing if I find anything. I see Ngozi was busy. Let's see. I don't know why you put this in Ngozi, but I'll let Ivory tackle this. This is not a question. I guess it's more of a statement.
Two things. One, Jalen hit the one in the bronze age, starting at Two, Jay starts only at.
My thing is, we know that. Like, I don't understand.
Yeah. I'm familiar with that. I know that. Yeah.
Our argument doesn't start in 900 BC. Here we go. We got Ngozi right here.
So this is my thing. This has been my argument the whole time. And it's like people not understanding it. And it's like most of the sources the brother was using is what I always use. I promoted North Africa for Proto-Semitic. Most of them sources said North Africa. The Levant sits on a plate tectonic between North Africa and Southwest Asia. So what's he just proved my whole point, even with the debate with Zion. How the fuck was people like, this is crazy, bro.
I'm gonna be honest with that debate. I didn't understand what you were saying.
Okay.
I didn't understand because it was so fast and you had that mask on. It was jumbled. So I didn't know what you were saying in the second round.
Right, but most of the second round is based off the information that the brother given. I said
yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm like, I didn't know you were saying all of that.
Yes, man. This brother did a good job. Like, can't nobody say Proto-Semitic came from J. My whole argument is, if we follow the timeline when J did come in and conquered the people or assimilated, it mixed with the women, it took on Semitic languages. I personally believe the biblical stories was talked about through oral tradition before it was written down. By the time it was written down, things become filtered by other people. Because if we follow the chronology of the Bronze Age to when the Israelites established, even though the original inhabitants was J was around that time period when the Israelites, when you have the time of Judah. Me personally, I think that the traditions was talked about thousands and thousands of years before it was written, which put it back in the E category. Even when the Hebrews went back into Egypt, for some reason they kept going back to their mother base where that E probably developed that anyway, and they kept going back. And when they went back into Canaan, people that was there wasn't the original inhabitants of Canaan, so they going over there sniping foreigners. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. We hinted at that earlier.
You can show my screen if you want. You shoot.
Oh, okay. I'm about to say we actually got a question, but all right.
No, I just think I think the brother did an excellent job, but this has been my argument the whole time, Yashu. This is my argument. I would never let Jay have Semitic. Afro-Asiatic starts in Northeast Africa. The Levant is part of Africa and Southwest Asia. This has been my argument.
Yeah.
I mean, even with the CF model, even with the CF model, he talked about CF being Japheth. That's what I'm trying. DEE and Japheth. By the time you get that CF, all those Eurasians that developed near the Caucasus. I believe that the J spoke a language isolate that was related to Proto-Indo-European because the Yemeniya was a crossbreed between Caucasus hunter-gatherers and a pre-population that was partially responsible for becoming Native Americans. That R1b is related to P and Q on the paternal side, but they had an intermediate cousin kinship through the Caucasus hunter-gatherers, mainly through their maternal lineages. But that J marker spoke some type of language that was close to Proto-Indo-European when it was in the Caucasus, yet still it assimilated amongst them. Because I believe the Sumerians wasn't us at all. You know, them Iranians and all them people were all related.
Yeah, we with you there.
Definitely.
If you start making those people Shemitic, then you pretty much made all of these Indo-European people Shemitic, which don't make no sense.
Man, y'all killed this, man. I'm going to listen to this show again. Yes, you did an excellent job. This was great. Wallahi. But I know one thing. Y'all should be Muslims now.
No, y'all should be a Muslim scholar.
I mean, Hebrew, Muslim, we all the same. But I wanted to say this, and I'm going to go. I want people to be cautious when they say Arab with the Natufians. It's talking about the Bedouin Arabs. And the Bedouin Arabs, that's mainly close to Qatar and those in Oman and the people in Yemen and Socotra. And, you know, so it's not talking about just a regular everyday Arab, the Saudi family. No, it's talking about the indigenous, the Mahiris, people in Yemen, Socotra. Those people. And also the Natufians was 23% North African, 6.8% Omatic. So, man, y'all just snapped out with this. I want people to know that the Arab component that the Natufians had was not regular Arab. It was Bedouin type people.
Yeah. He covered that. He brought up the Qatani people and their relation to haplogroup E. And he brought up an article that a lot of these other groups that we consider Arab have actually just been Arabicized. But the original Arabs are pure Arabs, according to the language that was being used in that article. Yeah, about the Qatani people. Is that what you got on the screen?
Yeah, right here. I got it on the screen right now.
Yeah, hold on. Let me see.
I appreciate y'all, man. I'm going to keep listening in.
It says like JP58, EM34. It is also shared with their Semitic cousins, the Jews. Haplogroup E1B1B is considered the prime candidate for the origin and dispersal of Afro-Asiatic. I don't see it. Oh, that's at the top. It's the top. I read the wrong one.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it's late. The other subclades of J1 cannot be considered to be the paternal descendants of the first speakers of Arabic. These other J1 lineages were Arabicized alongside other haplogroups J2, Q1b, etc. during the Islamic expansion from the 7th century onward. Yeah, that's what I was just right. Perfect. On time. Yeah, that's on point. They were Arabicized.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, according to the studies, people are saying, you know, these people would have had the initial or original Arabs would have had E markers.
Yup. Quatsanites. People in Yemen. Yitzhak's people.
Yeah, it says right there, E1B1B M-M34 is another important Arabic lineage being found in 25% of Jordanians, 10% of Saudis.
Yep. J is not the only haplogroup in the Middle East. You have E there.
Big facts. You gonna answer the question on the stream?
Oh, I didn't even pay attention.
But it was a question out there.
Also, shouldn't the first Levantine people be Canaanites? What have you found that resolves that? You'll be surprised who the Canaanites are. All right, so I'll give you some pointers on who to study if you want to know who the Canaanites are. Study a group known as the Hurrians, Hurrian. Study the Hurrians. The first Levantine people would not be the Canaanites. The only people I consider to be the Canaanites are the people who have those Canaanite names mentioned in the Bible.
Right. It's the best way to put it. First people in Canaan would not be, like you said, people were there prior to the establishment of the Canaanite civilization. Let me go up. What was the other question? He had the same guy while you were presenting had another question. Where is it at? Oh, here it is.
How does haplogroup D fit into all this, as DE were once one, and some say D is Shem as well? Also, what haplogroup is Ishmael? So I believe D is actually of Shem as well. DE is Shem. And, D would have just split going into Asia. Pretty much, pretty much staying in East Asia. Ishmael would have a E1B1B lineage. Which subclade? I can't get into that. I think I talked about the different subclades of E. Let me see. Yeah, right here. I talked about the different subclades. So it says the downstream of CTS1096, the Y14891, and the Z2108 clades are typically found among people of Jewish ancestry, while PF6391 and Z21421 are found in the Levant, Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, Jordan, and the Arabian Peninsula. F1382 appears to have expanded during the Iron Age from the Levant to the Arabian Peninsula, where it is found exclusively today. So, when it comes to these various sub-branches of E, it could be any of them that could be Ishmael, because you do have a lot of different ones in Arabia.
This guy, you want to address that?
If Ishmael is Iumbiumbi and Isaac is Iumbiune, what is Esau? I wonder if I want to spoil who Esau is. I don't feel like. No, I'm not going to answer that question. Sorry, man. I don't want to spoil who Esau is because I'll make a presentation on who is Esau.
I think he's been listening to other people like Lion Farm.
Who's that?
It's an Israelite that teaches that Ishmael is E1B1B, Jacob's E1B1A, and Esau is E1B1C or E1B1A2. And it's just a ridiculous model. And I had him on my channel and I disagreed with him and he didn't like it. But it's like E1B1A is not an individual. Like I want everybody, this is a PSA for everybody watching. E1B1A is not an individual. E1B1B is not an individual. E1B1A2 is not an individual. It's a haplotype or haplogroup that consists of many or numerous peoples. Like you're not looking at the information correctly. I'm sorry if the brother who asked that is not coming from that lion form. But he said something similar to that. I'm just trying to throw it out there and make sure no one's confused by that. Because he was like, oh, well, Isaac is, how did he put it? I know Chemo was there. Yeah, Chemo, I know you was there when he said that. He said, how did he break it down? Isaac was EV38. I can't remember how he broke it down. I think he broke it down. Isaac was or Abraham was EP2, and then Isaac would be. Hang on, I can't even do it in my head because it was so crazy. Abraham had Isaac. Isaac had Jacob and Esau, right? Okay, so Isaac would be EP2, and then and Abraham also Ishmael. So this is how he did it. Abraham would be EP2. Ishmael would have been E1 B1B. So EM215. And then he had Jacob as what did he have Jacob as? Because I can't even make it make sense.
He's leaving out a whole bunch of other ethnic groups.
Yeah, I just it was just so
like who's dropped on?
It was so bizarre. And I was like, bro, that doesn't work. Jacob can't be EV38.
Who are the Midianites?
And I was trying to tell him, listen, you can't make one person EV38. I said, if all I have to do is find another EV38 chromosome, and you're finished. And of course, what did he do when I showed him an EV38 chromosome? Oh, the white man made that up. There it is. Thank you, James. I couldn't remember. He said Jacob was E1B1A, Ishmael was E1B1B, and Esau was E1B1C.
Right, yeah. So who's Midian? Who are the Midianites?
That means every time you see E1B1A, every time you see E1B1B, E1B1B, 1C, this is who they are. I told him that you can't. That's not how DNA works.
No.
He made a 12-tribe subgroup in E1B1A. Yeah, that was another argument that he made. He said, oh, well, there's 12 haplogroups or haplotypes within E1B1A. And, during the discussion, I'm like, there's more haplotypes in E1B1A. It's like one of the most diverse haplotypes. Like, why would you even say something like that?
Mm-hmm.
The brother classes in session says, I can see how he came to that conclusion, though, because haplogroup supposedly means you share a common ancestor. Well, haplogroup does mean you share a common ancestor, but the way he's framing it doesn't make any sense. He's trying to say that everybody that's E1B1B would be Ishmael. Everybody that's E1B1C would be Esau. And it just doesn't work like that. There was a cluster of EP2, and if there's a cluster of EP2, then any one of those lineages could mutate to E1B1B or E1B1A. That's just the reality of it. Trying to stamp, like what he said, trying to stamp Jacob E1B1A, Ishmael E1B1B, and Esau E1B1C just wouldn't work. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to diverge, but that question, it kind of brought, made me remember him. So you guys, please ask and pose questions about the presentation that the brother presented. You want to answer that one there?
Let's see. Then who are all the sons of Abraham in Genesis chapter 25. Can't make it up. Do you mind going to Genesis 25, Yeshua?
Yeah, I can go to Genesis 25. You know who that is? That's I believe that's Jacob and Esau.
Oh, it is. Who are all the sons of Abraham?
Let me pull it up. But Genesis 25 should be the birth of the twins. Oh no, it does have the it has the lineage. Yeah, I see it. Here it is. My bad. All right, so it says Abraham married another woman whose name was Keturah. She bore him Zimran, Jokshan, Medan, Midian, Ishbak, and Shua. Jokshan was the father of Sheba and Dedan, and the descendants of Dedan were the Ashuriam and the Letshim and the Laomim. The sons of Midian were Epher, Hanak, Abadai, and Eldai. All these were Keturah's descendants. Abraham left everything he owned to Isaac, but while he was still alive, he gave presents to the sons his other wives had borne him. Then he sent these sons to the land of the east, away from his son Isaac. Abraham died at the ripe age of 175. His son Isaac and Ishmael buried him in the Machpelah cave in the field east of Mamre that had belonged to Ephron, son of Zohar the Hittite. Yep. It was the field that Abraham had brought from the Hittites. Both Abraham and his wife Sarah buried there. After the death of Abraham, God blessed his son Isaac, who lived near the well of the living one who sees me. The descendants of Ishmael, whom Hagar, the Egyptian slave of Sarah, bore to Abraham, had the following sons, listing in the order of their birth: Nababayoth, Kedar, Abdil, Mitsam, Mishma, Duma, Masa, Hadad, Tima, Jetur, Napish, and Kedemah. They were the ancestors of the 12 tribes, and their names were given to their villages and camping places. Ishmael was 137 years old when he died. The descendants of Ishmael lived in the territory between Havilah and Shur to the east of Egypt on the way to Assyria. They lived apart from the other descendants of Abraham's. This is the story of Abraham's son Isaac. Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebekah, the daughter of Bethuel, an Aramean from Mesopotamia, and the sister of Laban. Because Rebekah had no children, Isaac prayed to the Lord for her. The Lord answered his prayer, and Rebekah became pregnant. She was going to have twins, and before they were born, they struggled against each other in her womb. She said, "Why should something like this happen to me?" So she went to ask the Lord for an answer. The Lord said to her, "Two nations are within you. You will give birth to two rival peoples. One will be stronger than the other. The older will serve the younger." The time came for her to give birth, and she had twin sons. The first one was reddish, and his skin was like a hairy robe, so he was named Esau. The second one was born holding on tightly to the heel of Esau, so he was named Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when they were born. I mean, you want me to keep reading, or?
I mean, you can stop there. So, what does he want? What does he mean by then? Who are all the sons of Abraham in Genesis 25? I mean, by a genetic standpoint, I would say they're all E markers, different E markers. Because remember, there are a lot of different E markers.
Yeah, I mean, to be logically consistent, if they all share the same dad, then they would have to all share the same macro haplogroup. They'll all have to be E.
As a matter of fact, I have my own personal opinion on the Midianites as an example, who they are and how they have E, but I'm not going to go into it tonight. So are we saying D, E, D, and E is Shem, and that those haplogroups can develop into? No. Well, yes and no. I am saying that D, E is Shem, but I wouldn't say D, E is Esau, Ishmael, or Israel. They will have E markers specifically. They wouldn't have D markers. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, and the information about the Arabicized Jews that would also lend credence to the Ishmael narrative. If brothers want to go that narrative, Ishmael would have had E markers too. If brothers are trying to say that these would have been the original Arabs. So bottom line is all of them would have had E markers.
Yep. And as I showed multiple times, there are a lot of heavy concentrations of E markers in the Middle East. So any of them can belong to those lineages mentioned in the Bible. There are a lot.
All right. Anybody have any questions in regards to the presentation that was given?
Yes. Yes, they do. Do the Ashanti have E markers? Yes.
All right. Let me see if I can find some. Let me see if I can find something I may have missed.
Okay.
Can you answer that one?
When we end the Q&A, I'll make a final announcement about what I'm going to do for the next few days or next few months.
Okay. No, man. It looks like I don't see anything. All right, so that's the comments.
All right. Well, since that's the end, I'll go ahead and make this last announcement so we can end the show. I'll pop up on Clubhouse. But so after the show, I'll be on Clubhouse. I'm gonna make a quick room, and y'all can join. But now I'm sort of getting very, very close to being officially done, and therefore I have bonus content, bonus episodes that I can post on the Shoots channel for you guys. And after this bonus content, I'll be off the show for a while. I'll be working on my own content. I'll be working with Divine Prospect and Orthodox Moore and other Hebrews in the field of genetics. That doesn't mean I'll be gone forever. I'll pop up every now and then, and I eventually might even bring new presentations. Well, I will bring new presentations to the channel if Shub allows it. And these next few. This bonus content that I have is about, going off the top of my head, it could be about 3 or 4 more episodes, and then I'll pretty much be done. I still got to work on one, going off the top of my head, I still got to work on 3 more presentations and then I'll pretty much be done. So yeah, it's like I said, it's bonus content, so it's a surprise. I'm not going to tell y'all the name of it or what I'll be covering, but it'll definitely be very impactful and a strong sign off for me to leave the show. And y'all can always, do your research and have this information to counter people who might question you on DNA. But yeah, that's all I have to say. I think Yeshub, are you going to do a video tomorrow in the daytime or wait till night? I could do my next show tomorrow.
It'll have to be night because I return to work tomorrow. So
okay,
might be best if we do it at night.
Okay, well, same time, 9. Well, not 9. Same time, 10 o'clock. I'll have a episode, a bonus episode ready for you guys and gals. And again, I'll be on Clubhouse. I'm gonna make the room when Yeshub starts the song.
All right, so we appreciate everybody that came by and soaked up this scholarship, man. Like I said, we got the savant from the Levant here, and you guys should all support his channel on YouTube, the Hebrew of Israel. Because like he just stated, he will be starting to upload content over there. So if you want to see this brother, love and support this brother, go to the Hebrew of Israel on YouTube. This brother want to know about breaking down T. We don't have a video breaking down T. That's brother.
No, I don't have one. No.
Yeah, but we're aware of the argument. All right.
FM89.
FM89 lineages, man. Japheth all day. And, rest in peace to the CHG Caucus Hunter Gatherer group. Ivry did a great job at, pretty much elucidating who would be the Semites and who would be pretty much related to the people that brought forth Proto-Indo-European languages. And, J markers are related to those that brought in Indo-European languages. The E markers are related to the people that brought in Afro-Asiatic and Semitic languages. I mean, it's just very simple. So on that note, we bid you a farewell. Subscribe to the channel. Like the channel. Subscribe to the Hebrew of Israel on YouTube. Let me see if I can drop the link to his channel. I want you guys to go over there right now. Subscribe to his channel. Hit that notification bell because he's not going to be on this channel forever. He's going to build his own platform up, and I want you guys to support him. And if you love this content, make sure you go over there and subscribe to his channel. Hit that notification bell so you won't miss out when this brother begins to regularly upload on his own channel. All right. So with that, shalom.
Greetings to you all. I've been sent here to do great things, amazing things, beautiful things, positive things, blessing things, healing things, loving things, happy things, for the rebuilding of the new world, the blessing of the world, to build the kingdom here of the Most High God here on earth. Blessings to you, sending you love and positive vibrations around the world. Blessings to you, and welcome.
Most motivation, start with devastation. You must fall before you rise, they want a demonstration. I'm here to get it all, right before I spend it all. The elder need to come and see the youth, they need to get involved. I want the finer things, in love with shiny things, descended from black royalty, so you can blame my veins. I just call it blessings, I got the right perspective. If I see myself going off, I'm just gonna change direction. I love the brotherhood, with all the falls of brotherhood. I ain't gotta say a damn word and know it's understood. Yeah, we make mistakes, but that's what make us great. Learn how to accept apology without acting fake. I know the pot is hot because you're grudge bearing. A lot of niggas going blind because they sun staring. They on the mission to dim the light, we call it tail bearing. The law said thou should not covet, but he's still staring. And now I'm mortified with all the sins that multiplied. Got your brother crying at the wall like a Mordecai. I'm really horrified. A lot of brothers effeminized. They really start to bug my damn nerves. I use pesticide.
Unlearn, relearn, and apply. Get your blessings from the Most High. Matthew 7:7, seek and ye shall find. If ye knock, it shall be open wide. Blessings, ayy, get your blessings. Ayy, Deuteronomy 28:2-3. All these blessings shall come upon thee. All these blessings shall overtake thee. Get your blessings, hearken unto thee. Blessed shall thou be in the field. Blessed shall thou be in the city.
I push a Range Rover until the rain's over. Dying from an overdose of hate, man, he can't stay sober. But it's not the car, it's my spirit, man. Claiming that he show brotherly love, but he never does. There's no greater wealth than your family's health. Gather all the negativity and put it on the shelf. And it's nothing wrong when you have success. A father leave inheritance to his children, that man is blessed.
Unlearn, relearn, and apply. Get your blessings from the Most High. Matthew 7:7, seek and ye shall find. If ye knock, it shall be open wide. Blessings, ayy, get your blessings. Ayy, Deuteronomy 28:2-3. All these blessings shall come upon thee. All these blessings shall overtake thee. Get your blessings, hearken unto thee. Blessed shall thou be in the field. Blessed shall thou be in the city.
Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. 7 candlesticks up, and I've been telling y'all it ain't a debate. It's a stick up, gang.